The number of independents and Republicans who voted in this Democratic primary is unprecedented. This is proof that there is something happening in Texas. Tonight, the people of our state gave this country a little bit of hope. And a little bit of hope is a dangerous thing.
That was Texas State Representative James Talerico, now U.S. Senate candidate, after winning the state's Democratic primary last night against Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. But this morning, it's still unclear who he will face in November. Incumbent Senator John Cornyn and Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton are officially headed for a May 26th runoff after both failed to secure 50% of the vote in the Republican primary last night. That's big news.
And I would just say, as an outside observer, I don't know Ken Paxton. I've never met him. I know John Cornyn. I would just say the fact that a guy that has had as many problems as he has had in government, to be like Republicans, the fact that he's even close to John Cornyn, given all of his legal problems and challenges, it's just absolutely amazing. I will say, though, most of the energy, Willie, on James Talerico, a guy that has just sort of exploded onto the national stage, a lot like Barack Obama. And yes, I will say a lot like Barack Obama did, who was a state senator. With James Talerico, you've got a guy that is not your father's Democrat. He quotes the Bible an awful lot. He uses it to not preach hatred and division. He uses it to preach inclusion. He uses it to talk about the importance of treating people decently, giving people hope. And as they're sorting through the numbers this morning, one of the reasons he won, of course, he was expected to win educated white voters. The question was, how would he do with Hispanics and his populist rhetoric? Which wasn't radical populist rhetoric. It was, hey, there is a class war, and it's the billionaires that are winning that class war. But also talking about his faith really resonated in the Hispanic communities across the state of Texas, and that probably was the deciding thing last night in an extraordinarily important race. And if Ken Paxton does win the Republican primary, expect Democrats to pour a ton of money into this race. It will be one of the great marquee races to see whether Texas stops being fool's gold for Democrats. And finally, you have a Democrat winning statewide for the first time in decades there.
Yeah, it has been fool's gold for a long time. Everyone talks in the Democratic Party about flipping Texas, and it just doesn't happen. It remains a red state, except this candidate, James Talerico, who, as you say, comes along, leads with his faith, speaks fluently on the issues, wins over people like Joe Rogan, goes into places that Democrats haven't always been great. And he ran a great campaign. And Jasmine Crockett has not yet conceded because of some irregularities, some problems they had in the vote in Dallas. But even with that, Talerico will hold on to win. He has declared victory. So you have James Talerico going up against, we will see, because now we get 2.5 more months on the Republican side in this runoff between Cornyn and Paxton. As you said, Paxton, who has made a virtue of just being at Donald Trump's side through everything, has many, many personal problems. He has many, many legal problems. He has problems in government. He was there helping Donald Trump attempt to overturn the 2020 election. So he was relying on his fealty to Donald Trump to carry the day. Did not quite get him there last night. So now we get a runoff, John Lemire. That will be fascinating. Tons more money going to be spent there. It'll be interesting to see now whether Donald Trump, he has not backed anyone in this race. If now he looks and says, okay, I'm going to listen to John Thune, I'm going to listen to Senate Democrats and get behind John Cornyn, or does the loyalty of Ken Paxton win the day and earn his endorsement to then go on, take on Talerico in what really should be a competitive race in Texas?
Yeah, on that point first, I was talking to some people close to the president yesterday about this decision and what will come. And I think we may learn sooner than later. There's two camps here. There's certainly those. I mean, Trump himself is fond of Paxton. They're more ideologically aligned. You know, he appreciates Paxton's loyalty. But there's going to be a lot of pressure from the Senate itself, Majority Leader Thune, and some in the West Wing in the White House political operations to get behind Cornyn and get behind Cornyn soon, because it's the idea of trying to hang on to the Senate. And there's a sense here. I mean, Democrats are openly rooting for Ken Paxton. Yeah. They feel like they would have a much better shot to beat him in November than Cornyn, the incumbent. So that's going to be a defining decision coming soon. But yes, it's very, very close. On the Democratic side, yeah, Talerico's obviously, a star here, like a star in the making. It's a rapid rise. He's been very good at media, not just Joe Rogan. He probably got a late boost in recent weeks because of the controversy about his appearance going to be on Stephen Colbert. Yep. And then Colbert said that the Trump administration stepped in to knock it down, Joe and Mika, so he wasn't allowed. So Texas has been, as you just said, it's been the white whale. I mean, Democrats keep thinking they can get there, they can get there, they can get there. This, though, seems to be a path for as close as they'll come, particularly if, as we see right now, there's so much enthusiasm on the Democratic side nationally, not nearly as much for Republicans.
Well, John, and I'm so glad that you brought up what happened with Colbert. Here's yet another example. I swear, I just wish these Republicans weren't so stupid. I wish they'd listen to me. I'm trying to help them out a little bit here just to make it a fair fight in the fall. But what did we say? What did we say, first of all, when they took Colbert off the air? You're going to pay for it. They did pay for it with South Park 3 or 4 days later, deciding they're going to lean in even harder, right? And so here, they try to keep Talerico off the show. What happens? They give him a boost. If you talk to Jasmine Crockett, she'll say the same thing. I was ahead until that controversy. So the very person they were trying to defeat, the very person whose message scared them, is the very person who they helped win this race. This just keeps happening over and over. They think they can game the system. They think that somehow they're going to be able to win. In the end, voters have the final say. To that point, though, I do want to bring up one thing that happened last night before we move on. And I had a lot of Democrats that are campaign veterans, have been in campaigns over the past 20 years, reaching out to me last night saying, look what's happening in Texas right now. They've changed where people vote. There's a lot of confusion. A judge said, okay, we're going to give you a 2-hour extension, and so you can go vote in those 2 hours so nobody will be disenfranchised because of a change of polling places. Then the Texas Supreme Court steps in and says, no, we're not. If you voted, if you weren't in line at the time prescribed, even if there was confusion, it was the government's part, too bad, your votes aren't going to be counted. So this is a really good trial run for Democrats. This is the sort of thing that the Democratic Party needs to be ready for, because you're going to have Republicans trying time and time and time again between now. And I'm not talking about voter ID. This is something completely different. They're going to try time and time again to confuse Democratic voters, to try to do whatever they can to stop them from voting. You even have United States senators that are saying, hey, let's have ICE hang out, try to intimidate people from voting. It's really, Mika, it's a good test run. But at the end of the day, Talerico wins, the person Republicans feared the most, and may possibly, especially if Ken Paxton wins his primary, may set up the Democrats' first decent chance of getting competitive in Texas in decades.
And flipping it blue. You mentioned ICE. Back on Capitol Hill, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Gnome got an earful from members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, including Republican Tom Tillis, who repeated his calls for her to resign. He ticked through a long list of issues, from her, quote, disastrous leadership to her false claims about 2 Americans who were gunned down by immigration officials on the streets of Minneapolis.
Who does Tom Homan work for? You or the president?
The president.
Okay. Why is that? Because I believe the president recognized that you weren't getting it done in Minneapolis, and you're putting us further away from pointing to this. We're beginning to get the American people to think that deporting people is wrong. It's the exact opposite. The way you're going about deporting them is wrong. The fact that you can't admit to a mistake, which looks like under investigation, is going to prove that Ms. Good and Mr. Petty probably should not have been shot in the face and in the back. Law enforcement needs to learn from that. You don't protect them by not looking after the facts. Not only should the FBI be investigating it, but every single law enforcement agency in that jurisdiction should be invited to it, so our law enforcement officers do not have this pall cast upon them. One of the reasons why ICE officers are having threats, and damn the people that threaten ICE officers, because so many of them are doing a good job, is because you've cast a pall on them by acting like we should investigate things differently. Officer-involved shootings have a formula that we should go through every time.
The road to Damascus, the chains fall off. Tom Tillis not running for re-election, free to speak his mind, and boy, he spoke his mind yesterday. You know, for those who, Alex had said this before, if you look at the transcripts of yesterday, it looks far more dramatic with a lot of the back and forths. But Kristi Gnome, unlike Pam Bondi, didn't wave her arm and yell and point and say really stupid things like look at the stock market when they talk about her shooting her dog. Kristi Gnome pretty much stayed level through it. But it was one lie after another lie after another lie after another lie. And everybody in the room knew she was lying. Still, again, the fact, if she survives another day, it is such an indictment of this administration and the fact that they're having some. I mean, listen, Tom Homan, again, it's like that scene from Fletch. Oh, good. The police. I mean, but Tom Homan is so much more competent than Kristi Gnome. He should be running it. I mean, I have no idea how any administration can keep somebody that the planes and everything else, the execution style shootings in the streets. You just go down the list, one lie after another. She would have been out of any other administration months ago.
Oh my God.
Yeah, the Tom Tillis haranguing, as it appeared to be, was called a performance evaluation, a 10-minute performance evaluation. You just saw a sliver of it there. It was blistering, and it all came from other Republicans on the committee. Senator John Kennedy went down other avenues to challenge Kristi Gnome. And then you had Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota. In a moment, we'll show our viewers just a little bit later, where she said, do you regret effectively calling Alex Preddy a domestic terrorist? Do you regret using this terminology immediately when it was clear from video that none of what you were saying was true? And she couldn't bring herself to apologize to the family and kind of tried to back away somehow from things that she said out loud, calling him indeed a domestic terrorist. So it is interesting, Joe, that the one thing that usually compels President Trump to make a change is if someone's making him look bad, if someone's hurting him. And she is, and she has been now for months and months and months. And yet, for whatever reason, he will not make that change when, as you said, you have Tom Homan sitting there capable of running this policy that Donald Trump wants to continue to see.
Yeah, we've been saying it day in and day out. She is hurting Donald Trump. She's hurting his poll numbers. She's destroying his numbers on immigration, which was always his strongest suit. Now you look at his numbers on immigration, it's upside down, despite what's happened at the southern border. It's an easy call. I don't understand why the call's not being made, but it's not. And the administration will continue suffering until they decide to make the obvious call. But yeah, she was lying yesterday time and time again. She couldn't say she was sorry. She lied saying that she never blamed Stephen Miller for everything, you know, for blaming Stephen Miller. And then they have quotes of her blaming Stephen Miller. Again, this is it's, you know, it's amateur night in Dixie, as Fantastic Mr. Fox would say.
We also
amateur night in Dixie.
New reporting in the situation with Iran. The U.S. government is urging Americans in the Middle East to leave as the war with Iran enters its fifth day. However, many are having trouble finding a way out. And the American embassies in Jerusalem and Qatar say they are unable to help citizens evacuate. So far today, Israel has announced it is carrying out a, quote, broad wave of strikes targeting Iran's infrastructure. Israel has also continued to carry out strikes against Iranian-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon. Meanwhile, the head of United States Central Command said last night that the American military continues to carry out strikes in Iran 24/7. Admiral Brad Cooper said the U.S. and Israel have jointly struck nearly 2,000 targets with more than 2,000 munitions since the start of the war. This comes as President Trump pushed back yesterday on claims that Israel has led the United States into the war with Iran. Earlier this week, Secretary of State Marco Rubio suggested the U.S. faced an imminent threat because Israel was going to attack Iran, and Iran would then hit back at U.S. forces. Here's how the president responded when asked about that yesterday in the Oval Office.
Did Israel force your hand to launch these strikes against Iran? Did Netanyahu pull the United States into this war?
No, I might have forced their hand. You see, we were having negotiations with these lunatics, and it was my opinion that they were going to attack first. They were going to attack. If we didn't do it, they were going to attack first. I felt strongly about that. And we have great negotiators, great people that do this very successfully and have done it all their lives very successful. And based on the way the negotiation was going, I think they were going to attack first. And I didn't want that to happen. So if anything, I might have forced Israel's hand. But Israel was ready and we were ready. And we've had a very, very powerful impact because virtually everything they have has been knocked out now.
All right, let's bring in columnist and associate editor of the Washington Post, David Ignatius. David, first of all, it seems like the initial attack has ended. We seem to be moving into the next phase of this war. What does that next phase of this war look like based on your reporting?
So, Joe, I talked to intelligence veterans, people who are close to the White House, to try to get a sense of what that next phase is, and I'll share with you a few of their comments. First, President Trump said yesterday in the Oval Office that we're moving into the big-scale hitting phase. What does that mean? It means going after regime security forces, the Basij militia, the IRGC Corps, the special units of the police in Iran, who do so much of the repression, who killed so many of the protesters in January. To quote one of my sources, we can now destroy any target of our choosing in the country, and we use this opportunity to destroy their strategic nuclear and missile programs. The reason he expresses that confidence is that the U.S. and Israel have basically managed to take out Iranian air defenses. President Trump said that. It appears to be true. So they have pretty much an open shot at targets they're going after. Trying to explain what that means in Iran, this intelligence official said, imagine being an IRGC or Ministry of Intelligence officer in the field. You have no orders, no pay, perhaps a different boss or a different regime next week. That kind of thing is important. So that's a sense of how, on the U.S. side, despite the continuing confusion in explaining what the trigger for this war was, people have a fairly confident view of what's next. Just to add one additional caution, several sources that I talked to who were very much in the middle of this say there is no evidence yet of regime fragmentation. That's what you look for if you're thinking about regime change. You look for fissures at the top of the regime that suggests that you can pull people away into something different. To quote again one of my sources, the regime is a fabric. Trump has yet to unravel that weave. I thought that was a very clear statement of how Iran, despite all the pounding they're taking, it still remains integrated at the top.
Yeah, and David, you are right. The administration continues to change their message from reason for the attack, nuclear, then it was the ballistic missiles, then it was regime change, then it was Israel, sort of moved back to regime change. We're going to play the Marco Rubio clip in a little bit. He actually gives one of the most cogent answers to why they moved yesterday after blaming Israel the day before. I want to ask you about something that as much as I scoured news accounts, it's hard to get my arms around exactly where we are on missile counts, missile expenditures. And I feel like so many of these news reports, the reporters, not to any fault of their own, they're doing what you do, what I do, what we all do. They're trying to get information. But a lot of it sounds like spin coming from different governments, coming from different sources. And even if you get the missile count right, the missile expenditure percentages right, you then have the crude drone warfare, sort of the asymmetrical attacks where Iran could cause disproportionate damage to U.S. facilities based on, again, the level of weaponry. Tell us where we stand this morning on any sort of missile count you have, missile expenditure, the concern of asymmetric warfare, the ability for Iran to attack U.S. positions and allied positions throughout the Gulf.
So, Joe, obviously, these are guesses. We do know, just from what we can see, that Iran reacted to the initial attack with a real spasm of missile and drone attacks on countries across the Gulf. There were many, many missiles, scores, over several hundred fired at the UAE, many at Saudi Arabia and Qatar, Kuwait. So we know that there was a lot of volume of firing. In terms of specific estimates, here's from one official in the Gulf that I spoke with this morning. The number of Iranian missile launches appears to be decreasing. There were 350 missiles launched on day 1, 175 on day 2, 120 on day 3, and 50 yesterday. They still have capability, in other words. There were reports this morning from Israel that both Lebanon and Iran had fired missiles into Israel this morning. So there's still obviously some left. But those numbers give you a sense of what people in the field think is the decreasing missile capability of the Iranians.
Let's bring into the conversation contributing editor at the Financial Times, Kim Ghattas. She is live this morning in Beirut. Kim, thanks for being with us. Let's talk about the angle of the story where you are right now before we broaden it out to the wider Middle East. Israel attacking Hezbollah targets, it says, inside of Lebanon and the outskirts of Beirut, where you are right now. What is the scene like there this morning?
It's really quite tense because this is a different scenario from a year and a half ago when there was also a war between Israel and Hezbollah, and where there was a sense that despite the fact that it came as part of a larger conflict as well with war in Gaza and an episode of war and missiles between Iran and Israel, there was still something that felt more contained at the time, particularly in the targeting. Right now, the targets that Israel is striking are not only in southern Lebanon, but also in the southern suburbs of Beirut, and as well in the Bekaa Valley, all of which we have seen to continue over the last year despite the ceasefire. But now it's reaching in other parts of Lebanon. There are warnings for Iranian diplomats in Lebanon to leave the country. And this morning, a warning for all residents of southern Lebanon up until the Litani River, that's 40 kilometers into Lebanon, to leave that area. So we expect to see probably a ground incursion, a fairly large ground incursion, maybe not all the way up to the river, but certainly into Lebanon, and then pushing people out with further strikes. I think that, mostly people expect the infrastructure of Lebanon to still be, the airport, et cetera, to be safe. But it is feeling very different this time because it is part of this larger conflict, which, feels a little bit like Armageddon from where we're sitting. And it's important to note that there's a lot of anger in Lebanon, including within the Shia community, Hezbollah's constituency, for them having launched the first salvo of missiles against Israel and having dragged Lebanon yet again into this conflict. And let me just explain why there is anger specifically this time. Over the last year, Israel has continued to strike Lebanon despite a ceasefire being in place. And it has killed members of Hezbollah, and it has killed civilians. And Hezbollah never retaliated, luckily for Lebanon. But it chose to strike Israel to avenge the death of Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran. And this is really a moment where the constituency of Hezbollah is thinking, what on earth are you doing? Without warning, without telling us, your supporters, that you're about to embark in this war, you dragged us and now we've lost our homes, we're refugees, we're sleeping on the street, etc. And I want to wrap up this answer by referring to a comment made by Lindsey Graham, who said yesterday, calling on the US to participate in this war alongside Israel and avenge the Marine barracks bombing from 1983 when 241 Marines were killed. This feels to me like a cycle that started in 1982 when Israel invaded Lebanon, and this invasion collided with the Islamic Revolution of Iran. Hezbollah was born, and 47 years later, we're seeing this play out with Lindsey Graham calling for avenging the Marines, and Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, who was at the time in 1982 Deputy Ambassador in Washington for Israel, saying that this war is something that he's dreamt of for 40 years.
And the majority of Americans, most Americans, diametrically opposed to Lindsey Graham and Benjamin Netanyahu's vision of an expanding war across the Middle East. They do not want it. Lindsey Graham may want it. Benjamin Netanyahu may want it. But the Americans are going to decide who's going to be running Congress next year. Do not want this. Independents, by a large margin, are opposed even to what's happened so far.
So Kim and David stand by. We'll have more with Kim Ghattas and David Ignatius on the ongoing war with Iran after a quick break. We'll be right back.
Just moments ago, Israel reported its military successfully shot down an Iranian jet over Tehran. The dogfight involved an Israeli F-35 fighter jet, marking the first shoot-down of a manned aircraft by an Israeli F-35 in history. The Times of Israel reports this also is the first time in about 40 years the Israeli Air Force has engaged in air-to-air combat with a manned aircraft. Again, shot down an Iranian plane over Tehran. We're back with our conversation with columnist and associate editor of the Washington Post, David Ignatius, and contributing editor at the Financial Times, Kim Ghattas. She is live this morning in Beirut. So, Jonathan Lemire, as we continue the conversation, just go back to the White House for a moment. Yesterday, in that Oval Office session with the media, Donald Trump effectively said a few things. Number one, he thought an attack was imminent. He said, in my opinion, an attack was imminent. U.S. intelligence officials have told us and other news operations that's not the case. He also said it may be true that the person who comes in to lead Iran after the Ayatollah may be as bad as he was. He conceded that point yesterday. So has this White House landed on a rationale for this war and a plan for today, for tomorrow?
Yeah, he said the worst case scenario would be someone as bad or as worse than the Ayatollah. And there's some reporting that perhaps his son might be favored now to take over. And it just sort of raises questions as to how much planning went into this. There seems to be a lot of questions. The rationale still unclear. We had President Trump sitting in the Oval Office next to one ally, the leader of Germany, but bashed two others. He said he's going to try to start a trade war with Spain because Spain wouldn't let the U.S. use one of their military bases. He also had very sharp words for the U.K. and Keir Starmer there. So there's lack of allies there. David, we talked about it earlier. There's certainly the munitions issue, the math, the logistics, like how much of these missiles do the U.S. still really have? And then, there's also, of course, the question of what is the end game? What is eventually the off-ramp? Because it has been so surprising to so many who know that President Trump favors these like one and done, big strikes, declare win, get out. Here he seems, at least for now, willing to entertain the idea of a much longer campaign, even, his officials keep saying, not ruling out putting boots on the ground.
So, Jonathan, I thought the president was still really roaring with the sense of power and determination. He wasn't backing down on the campaign at all, talking about staying in it for weeks, as long as it takes. And as I said earlier, speaking about a new phase in which the U.S. and Israel will have essentially unquestioned air superiority. In terms of planning for how you achieve real gains, what Iran and the Middle East look like after this is over, I still don't hear any clarity. The only person in that session in the Oval Office who yesterday talked about the day after was, in fact, the German chancellor, not Donald Trump. And he had some, I thought, thoughtful comments to make. I hear concern from former U.S. officials, from officials abroad, about this lack of clarity about where things are going. This is going to be a big war. It's going to last a long time. It's going to take a lot of military power to reopen the Straits of Hormuz so that oil can flow out, so that the supplies can flow in. It's going to take a long time for normal air traffic so that people who want to leave can get out. And so you need to have a kind of planning and clarity about the mission that so far we're just not hearing. And as I say, I do hear concern about that.
Yeah, Kim, I want you to talk about whatever you think is we need to know right now about what's going on. I am curious your initial thoughts on how you expect this war to reshape the Middle East. I won't say over the next generation or decade. All you can guess is maybe over the next week or two. Right. But obviously, a lot of people have feared this for quite some time. Certainly, UAE, Qatar, the Saudis, Lebanon, you name it, have feared this sort of regional war. What are you seeing thus far, and where do you think we're going?
So let me just first pick up on something that David was just saying. The concern is indeed that there is no planning for the day after. There's very little planning for the war. I haven't really seen or heard very specific, detailed day-to-day running of this war. Obviously, they wouldn't divulge all of that, but you can usually tell more or less. And it just goes to show that, yet again, America's track record in day-after planning is not very good. You just have to think about the US-led invasion of Iraq. Second, I think this could still last a few weeks, 3, 6 weeks, etc., longer potentially. You could perhaps see the US declare a kind of victory. Suddenly, President Trump decides, he wakes up in the morning and he decides that, okay, this is enough. Oil prices are too high. We've lost a few too many servicemen. I'm losing my MAGA base. And he could unilaterally declare that America has achieved its aims, whatever
Kim,
they are.
Who fills that void? I mean, that's the fear. We saw what happened when the United States went into Iraq and then left Iraq. The void was filled by ISIS. Who fills the void in Iran if it's not the current leadership?
Well, at this moment, it still looks like the current leadership, just a different face. The son of Khamenei, or other members of the IRGC, better or worse, more pragmatic or less pragmatic. But even if the U.S. decides that it has done what it wants to do, I suspect that Israel will continue strikes against Iran, against Lebanon, and other countries in the region. And what era we're entering, after having been, in a way, to some extent, Iran's Middle East, because, that's how I write in Black Wave, that, the moment of 1979, when the Islamic Republic came into being, brought in this architecture, this regional architecture, set up by, in large part, actually, Ali Khamenei. This was his pet project, much more so than Ayatollah Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic. All these forward defense bases, that is now coming to an end. That doesn't mean that the Islamic Republic is coming to an end, but Iran's reach is no longer what it used to be on the ground. Of course, it can still inflict a lot of pain. But I think we're entering the era of a Middle East that is very much dominated by Israel's military adventures and expansionist view of its presence in the region, and one that is supported by President Trump. And if I may just circle back to the idea of why President Trump entered this war, I think that Marco Rubio was probably being very candid and then regretted doing so. And if you go back to 1982, the reason why the U.S. came to Lebanon with the Marines is because Israel had invaded and America felt that it had to come in. And I know from reading the memoirs of George Shultz that they felt that Israel had sort of sucked them into this war. And that's when America became a visible target in the Middle East.
And 240 Marines died.
Yeah.
Contributing editor at the Financial Times, Kim. Yes, ma'am.
Give me one last point. So I have a lot to say. As you can see, it's sort of an intense time in this country. I do want to make clear, Joe and Mika, that there are many people in this region who are only too happy to see the end of Ali Khamenei, a man who ruled with an iron fist in Iran, who made lives miserable for the Lebanese, for Syrians who backed all these militias. If only the United States had actually come with a plan for the day after that would benefit the people of this region, instead of just ushering in what looks to me like chaos.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Two things can be true at one time, as we always say. Yes, I think most of the region may be celebrating his departure. At the same time, it could have been done in a way that was far more thought out and didn't break into a regional war. Contributing editor at the Financial Times, Kim Ghattas, live from Beirut. Thank you. And David Ignatius, if you will, stay with us. I just, on the other side of the break, I briefly want to ask you about Donald Trump choosing yesterday's press conference as an opportunity to attack NATO and to attack Zelensky as the P.T. Barnum of Ukraine at a time when the Ukrainians are making great progress against the Russians.
And still ahead, one of our next guests says don't confuse the Iran war's mega critics with most Republicans. David Drucker joins us with that new piece. Plus, former Democratic Governor Roy Cooper of North Carolina joins us on the heels of his Senate primary win last night. And as we go to break, a quick look at the traveler's forecast this morning from AccuWeather's Bernie Rayno. Bernie, how's it looking?
Mika, it's damp and dreary across the mid-Atlantic today from Harrisburg toward Washington, D.C., Baltimore. Your exclusive AccuWeather forecast shows clouds and limited sunshine in New York City. Some sun, though, in Boston and Portland with high temperatures in the 40s. Now, watch out for the thunderstorms here from Dallas toward Oklahoma City toward Little Rock. They'll be locally severe this afternoon. The rest of the southeast is just dry and warm. No big travel delays today, but watch the low clouds around Philadelphia this morning. To help you make the best decisions and be more in the know, download the AccuWeather app today.
That's all. That's all.
More than you think.
There are many files where Jeffrey Epstein seems to speak as though he does know you personally. He quotes, "Hey, Hillary Clinton is much prettier in person." This was Tuesday, September 20th, 2011. And then another...
I'm not going to object to that.
Guess Epstein didn't have a type. Where was that Hillary in 2016?
I mean, you know, Willie...
She was incredible.
She was incredible. And what was amazing is the number of conservative voices that I say conservative, they're not conservative. The number of MAGA voices that actually came out and would literally say, okay, I hate Hillary Clinton. By the way, why were you saying that? I hate Hillary Clinton, but she's right here. And man, when she's right, she's right. There were all of these MAGA voices actually that even came out saying what an incredible job she did, again, with the clown show that she had to deal with.
Yeah, and because they know it was a clown show. And you can see there why Secretary Clinton wanted these hearings to be in public so everyone could see moments like that, but also the moments where she exposed and said, why isn't Donald Trump sitting here? We got these released clips. People can watch the full deposition. But what a wasted trip to Chappaqua for those Republicans to go up there and just walk into a trap, which is Hillary Clinton running circles around them and giving her, again, the opportunity to say, time to have Donald Trump sit. If you're going to have me sit, if you're going to have my husband, Bill Clinton, sit, time to get Donald Trump here. And now we're hearing from members of the Oversight Committee that they will, in fact, call Howard Lutnick. So some of this pressure and this story staying in the headlines and sticking around, and all these people around the administration being in the Epstein files, is now coming home to roost. And you may actually get some of these people like Howard Lutnick sitting before the committee.
I mean, and we warned them. You know who else warned them? You know who else warned Comer? His chief legal counsel.
Yeah. Well,
Arnold
there's
the Pig.
that.
Here we go.
Arnie.
So,
Arnie.
joining us now.
Well, hold a second. I want to ask David Ignatius really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
David,
there he is.
David, yesterday, there he is. There he is, chief legal counsel for James Comer, who, again, as I said, could be heard saying, screw this, fellas, I'm going home, before they started interviewing Hillary. Arnold the Pig knew, smartest pig in Green Acres, knew he didn't want to have any part of that. He was right, as always. David Ignatius, this is what they call in the business a hard turn. I want to ask you, you know, a lot of times Donald Trump will do things, and you and I have talked about this, where it looks crazy, and you go, yeah, crazy, but, you know, maybe it ends up being crazy like a fox in some moments when he does something for leverage. I can't even imagine what the justification would be for yesterday, in the middle of a hot war, where we don't know how this thing ends. He's attacking Spain, he's attacking the UK, he's attacking our NATO allies, and then takes this bizarre sideswipe at Zelensky, a man who is holding fast, doing what nobody imagined. He will, whether Donald Trump and the administration likes this or not, he will be remembered as a Churchillian figure 30, 40 years ago. And you can talk about corruption, you can talk about corruption in Ukraine, you can talk about all that. But what the Ukrainians are doing is nothing short of extraordinary. And they're pushing back against the Russians now. You know, the Trump administration will constantly tell people like you and me, oh, it's just a matter of time, the Ukrainians are going to lose. They've been saying that for a year. And it's just not happening. The Ukrainians continue to hold on. And the reward for that, for pushing against Russian aggression, is for the President of the United States to call him the P.T. Barnum of Ukraine. Maybe you can give me some guidance on why he did that, or what the impact of that is on our other allies.
I can't possibly. I just note the way that I think people were reacting to what they saw yesterday. So Donald Trump right now is a wartime president. There's a big war going on that is affecting the region. It's going to affect the American economy. It's going to have inflationary impacts. Big deal. And President Trump was focused in moments in his explanation of what he's doing, but he would tend to jump from subject to subject, sort of manic, darting back and forth, attacking Spain, attacking Britain in language I can't ever remember an American president speaking that way. And I think it tends to dilute the message that he's trying to give, which ought to be right now assurance, clarity. We know where we're going. Don't worry about the inflationary impacts. We've got it taken care of. He actually issued a tweet after that press conference saying U.S. would escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz. That's a good statement to make. The attack on Zelensky, again, these brave people fighting for their lives. I was there a month ago, Joe, and again saw the incredible Ukrainian toughness, sense of resilience. You want an American president to be celebrating those qualities, especially in wartime. So I think that, as you said, there were some strong themes from the president yesterday. He's locked into this war, but just too much darting back and forth from subject to subject.
Yeah, it'd be great if you could stay locked into the war, not attack the allies that we need, and not attack Ukraine. And again, the preposterousness of attacking Zelensky for corruption when you have Vladimir Putin on the other side, it's pretty extraordinary. If they want the war to end, probably should have their arms more tightly wrapped around Ukraine as friends. David Ignatius, as always, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you, David.
Let's bring in right now the senior writer for The Dispatch and columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, David Drucker. He has new reporting. I couldn't agree with more. He's like, don't confuse the Iran war MAGA critics with most Republicans. David, thank you for writing this piece. Because Meek and I had this conversation yesterday. She said, oh, well, John Thune supporting this war. I'm surprised that I said, Mika, there are so many things that Republicans have done that have distorted their conservative viewpoints and worldviews. This is not one of them. Since 1979, conservatives have wondered why America hasn't been tougher on this terrorist regime. Of course, we can all debate the reasons why
that was more my question.
We went in the wrong way. That we should have. Yeah, that was
reasoning.
That was more Mika's question, and the reasoning. We can debate all of that, but explain to viewers that how people like me that came of age in 1979 and saw the Iranians holding our people hostage, saw the Iranians killing our Marines in Beirut, saw the Iranians killing Americans at Khobar, so that really we can be twisted up about how Donald Trump is going about doing this, but not that Khomeini is gone and this regime is being rooted up.
Yeah, Joe and Mika, it's such a good point. You know, one of the arguments that so many Republicans had with Donald Trump as he sort of rose within the Republican Party in 2015 and 2016 is that he didn't believe in projecting American power abroad, concerns that he disfavored a muscular American foreign policy that was willing to use the military when Republicans felt it was warranted. It was such a part of Reagan Republicanism. And to your point about how seminal Iran and its regime has been to Republican foreign policy thinking, you go back, and this is even true, for me as a young kid watching this. One of my first political memories is the '79 revolution in Iran. American hostages are taken, and how captivating that was for the American public and for many Republicans during the 1980 campaign. And Walter Cronkite would famously close out his news broadcast every evening marking, and that's the way it is, and this many days for the hostages in Iran. And this feeling among Republicans that it was the originator of the peace through strength slogan, which was really designed to take on the Soviet Union, that it was that projected strength that forced the regime in Tehran to release the American hostages. Now, there's a lot more to it than that in the hindsight of history, but that was a large part of it, and certainly for many Republicans. So fast forward, you get to this, and you have so many Republicans, voters as well as Republicans in Washington, who are saying to themselves, after almost 50 years of diplomacy that hasn't worked, and it's good that we tried it, there's an argument for this, and I'm glad he's doing it, and it's something I can support. A lot of us are watching the very loudest voices, which these days are magnified on social media, something that didn't exist until relatively recently, and these seem to be the loudest voices. And they're not insignificant because they are part of this broader coalition that Donald Trump created that in particular helped him return to the White House in 2024. And if you want to look ahead to 2028, Donald Trump's a unique figure. He won't be on the ballot. It could cause Republicans problems in terms of their desire to recreate this coalition without him. In fact, it could cause them problems in 2026 because the stated policy strategy from Susie Wiles, the White House Chief of Staff, is to put Trump on the road and recreate that 2024 coalition, turning out for other Republicans. But if you want to look at where the breadth of the party is on this war right now, it's supportive. And according to my sources, and I checked with pollsters I trust and strategists, that includes Republican voters that identify with the MAGA movement specifically. And I think it's important for everybody to understand that if they want to understand the politics of this inside the party.
Yeah, and Willie, the overwhelming number of Republicans are going to support this for other reasons that David talked about, and he's right. It was an era-defining moment for those of us that came of age, '79, the hostage crisis, Ronald Reagan running in 1980. But we do hear loud voices, you know, the sort of the loudest voices on social media. And it's very easy to look at that and go, well, this is where the heart of the Republican Party is. No, it's not. I mean, it's an important part of the Republican Party. It was when I got there in 1994 to be skeptical of foreign engagements. And there's a long history of sort of this Taft American firstism, this isolationism. And that strain still runs down the side of the Republican Party. But, man, I don't think anybody should make any mistake thinking that rank-and-file Republicans are somehow offended that Donald Trump has gone into Iran, because they're just not.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting that one distinction, David, to make is that this president, over campaigns in 2016, 2020, and again in 2024, always talked about not getting America involved in what he called stupid wars, thinking about Iraq and Afghanistan going on for too long, and criticizing both Republican and Democratic presidents for the way they got into wars and then got out of them in the case of Joe Biden. So is there any blowback among his supporters, among MAGA supporters, to the fact that he promised to be an America First president, that we've heard from Marjorie Taylor Greene in the last week or so, going out very vocally and saying this is not what MAGA voted for, focus on what's going on at home, focus on immigration, don't get us tied up in these long wars. Is there any criticism and blowback on that point?
Well, there is, and it is happening in sort of the strongest quadrant of the MAGA base, if you will. Not the entirety of the MAGA base, but particularly online from influencers and from current and former Republican politicians that are populist in their nature and were attracted to Trump for these particular reasons. And as I mentioned, it could cause Republicans problems going forward, you know, with the coalition that they hope to recreate in the next couple of elections. I'd also point out that part of the problem the president is having here, that you guys have talked about a lot, but it's important, is he hasn't made a case in the months leading up to this, the way previous presidents would have, that gives people something to hang their hat on. You know, and you know, to the point about how this plays overseas, he's not making a case. And it's something, when I interviewed George Shultz about 10 years ago, before he had died, he said that Ronald Reagan always understood that the foreign leaders he was dealing with in the West had voters too, right? And there has to be more of a concern for how people think about this, rather than just using power because you have it, if you want people to not just be on board on day one, but day 100. And it's something where the president often gets himself into trouble. And I have voters telling me, you know, I can appreciate the underlying policy. I think he may have a point, but he's not explaining it well. I don't get it. And the execution seems like it's not working. And, you know, this is where you have, you know, if he's going to keep this coalition together and assuage the critics, he's going to have to do that. The thing is, he doesn't do what he doesn't do, and he just doesn't do this.
All right, David Drucker, stay with us. We want to get your take on the results out of the Texas primary. A lot ahead to talk about. We're also going to speak with...
David just described Donald Trump. And wait, we should put it on a bumper sticker. He doesn't do what he doesn't do because he doesn't do what he doesn't do, and he doesn't do it.
Okay.
That does explain
that would be it. We're also going to speak with member of the Armed Services Committee, Democratic Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona. He'll explain why he says service members deserve better leadership while risking their lives for the country. And later, the impact of the war on energy supplies. Steve Bratner has charts on how the conflict will force higher gas prices. We're back in just 2 minutes.
And then we have Senator Markwayne Mullin from Oklahoma, who doesn't seem to know which country we bomb.
There's no question that Iran clearly fits in that picture. It's up to the Iraqi people, or I'm sorry, the Iranian people, to declare war and ask for Congress to declare war on Iraq.
Oops. Has there ever been a Mark Waynier person than Mark Wayne?
And fortunately, you have President Hegseth, or I say President Hegseth, Secretary Hegseth, that has got a great relationship with President Trump, and President Hegseth's been there.
Okay. Now you're fired. Now you're in trouble.
Really,
all right.
Really, I don't know if you. I don't know if you saw that entire clip. If you haven't, you should. Where Markwayne Mullin He talks about how war smells, how it gets up in your nostrils.
Yeah.
Gets up in your nostrils, under your fingernail.
And you can taste it, Joe. You can taste war.
You can taste it. You can feel anybody that's not. He's never been there. No. Like I don't think he's been in war from the reports I saw. But then he talks about President Hegseth. It's interesting. He said yesterday, I think, that this isn't a war.
Right.
And the reporter said, well, you just called it a war when you came up here. He said, oh, I misspeak. And then, time and time again, he keeps saying this is not a war. Well, and they go, well, the president calls it a war.
Yeah.
And not just President Trump, but his own self-proclaimed President Hegseth calls it a war. So everybody's calling it a war, except for a couple of Republicans in Congress who don't want to call it a war. But again, the nostrils, it gets in your nostrils. You can feel it. You can taste it. That was quite a clip, Willie.
He went full Duval in Apocalypse Now. He loves the smell. He will smell napalm in the morning, having never smelled the napalm in the morning. By the way, they changed the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War. So this is a war. When you shoot missiles and kill people and they shoot back and kill a bunch of our service members, it's a war. We actually have someone right now who knows the taste of war, unfortunately. We, by the way, expect a Pentagon briefing at the top of the next hour with Iran. We'll bring that to you live. Democratic Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona joins us now. He's a member of the Armed Services Committee and served as a captain in the U.S. Navy. Also with us for the discussion, MS Now contributor, our good friend Mike Barnacle. Senator, I'll start with you on the state of the war this morning. We've heard these shifting rationales for why the joint attacks with Israel were launched over the weekend. It was about stopping their nuclear program once. It was about an imminent threat, the president repeated, to the United States. He said that again yesterday. We've heard that perhaps it was Israel that was going to go after the supreme leader, and therefore we had to take out some defenses because we knew there would be a response. We heard that from Secretary Rubio as well. As you sit at it, someone who served and fought in wars, what is the justification for this war?
Well, I think you got it right. I mean, it's a shifting explanation. I also heard yesterday about the imminent threat, but it was sometime in the future that the imminent threat would exist because of their ballistic missile capability. Hey, they don't seem to know what they're doing or why they did this. I think this is a perfect example of what happens when you have a leader of a country who doesn't take input, doesn't take advice, puts a lot of yes people around him, and makes these, decisions without the right input and without the right data. So I think this is not going well for them. And what that means is it's not going well for our country, and it's not going to go well for service members. I don't want to see a repeat of what happened in 2003 in Iraq when we wind up with a long and bloody conflict.
So, Senator, then there's the matter of what comes next. The idea was that if you take out the supreme leader and some of the leadership that was in that meeting in Iraq, President Trump said in that address immediately after on Saturday, now it's to you, the Iranian people. Take to the streets, go fight the IRGC, take over your country, take back your country from the regime that's been so brutal to you since 1979. What is, in your view, what is the plan for what comes next? Because for the moment, it looks like a version of the same people who were leading Iran are now rising up to lead it again.
Yeah, they don't have a plan. I don't think there was a strategic goal here, and they're flailing around. So no goal, no timeline. What that leads to is just more U.S. service members in a really, really challenging spot. You got to, I think one thing that I don't think has been really mentioned here much is how this president considers and his regard for U.S. service members. I mean, over the last 10 years, he's said a lot of things that makes me believe that he doesn't have the kind of respect that typical presidents have of members of the military and the challenges that they face. The Iranian people, they're in a tough spot. I mean, this is not an armed opposition. This isn't like 1979 when there were millions of people, in the streets here. It's much smaller. It's much less coordinated to the extent that, anything like this is coordinated. I want to see the Iranian people certainly rise up and replace this regime. And it's a good thing that the Ayatollah is gone, right? But, I mean, at this point, how do they do that? And 3 weeks ago, the IRGC murdered 30,000 Iranians. So this is going to be a challenging thing. I think by this point, the administration thought that this would all be over and there'd be a new government. Not that easy.
Senator, to the point that you just raised, we have lost 6 Americans thus far in this combat operation. And the larger point is that the President of the United States, I'm wondering if you feel the same way that many Americans seem to feel about it, he has not answered the question, why? Why now? Why are we there? What are we doing there? How long are we going to be there? Have you been satisfied with the answer, or did you hear an answer to that question, why?
Not even close. And how does this help Americans afford their health care, which, by the way, this president put a big dent in, right? Really cut if you were somebody on Medicaid or getting your health care from the Affordable Care Act exchange. He wanted to give a big tax cut to billionaires. How does this help you? By the way, costs are going to go up. Energy prices are going to go up. That's going to affect everything. How does this directly affect people that can't afford their lives? I don't see it. I don't see how it helps them. I don't see how this makes Americans safer. I mean, when you start talking about an imminent threat that is in the future, you're flailing.
So, Senator, President Trump took to social media in the last 24 hours or so ago and proclaimed that the United States has more or less unlimited stockpile of weapons, missiles, defense interceptors, and the like. We know that obviously is not true. But what have you heard? Have you been briefed at all about, even in broad strokes, the capability that the U.S. has and our partners in the Gulf have? Because there is a looming fear here that Iran will have missiles that at some point we may not be able to shoot down.
Yeah, I mean, this becomes a math problem, right? I mean, we've got air defense systems in the Middle East. We have interceptors. They have Shahed drones, a lot of them, and they have a lot of ballistic missiles. And which magazine runs out first? We can resupply these air defense systems, but it's not an unlimited resupply, and we have to take it out of other theaters. What does that do to that combatant commander? How can he, protect the assets that he's responsible for? If we start pulling things out of Indo-PACOM, so the Western Pacific, what do the Chinese think about that? Does that present an opportunity for them maybe down the road here to make their move on Taiwan? Again, I think we have a president that makes decisions, rather quickly, without a lot of data, without a lot of thought, without a lot of discussion about what the consequences are of doing this, and really without the discussion about what's the upside here. What are we getting out of this? Was this an imminent threat? Not really. I mean, the Iranian nuclear program was significantly damaged last summer. It was not obliterated. They had an ability to reconstitute it. But how do we attack that problem now? And back to the math problem. We're going to have to see. Yes, we've been asking these questions. I have specifically asked these questions, and I haven't gotten great answers.
All right, they're great questions, though. Retired U.S. Navy captain and member of the Armed Services Committee, Democratic Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona. Thank you very much for being on the show this morning. We really appreciate it. All right, joining us now, U.S. national editor and columnist at the Financial Times, Ed Luce. He's out with a new piece entitled Donald Trump's Dangerous War of Whim. And Ed, tell us about your piece, and why do you call it a whim?
Thanks, Mika. A whim because a war of choice, which is, of course, the phrase we're used to, is something where we're clear about what the intention is, even if we might in the case of the Iraq War or Libya, be critical of how it was executed. We knew what the goal was. Here, the goal sort of keeps changing from hour to hour. Every time Trump calls one of our colleagues, every time he makes public remarks, every time Marco Rubio is, cornered on Capitol Hill, there are different rationales for why this is happening. Now, I think Israel does have a clear aim in this war, which is to topple the regime. Trump has said he shares that aim and then denies he shares that aim. So it's a whim because the only real clue as to what America's goal is and therefore what its exit strategy is lies in Trump's head. And I think we're all pretty clear that Trump's head is a sort of whirling kaleidoscope. There is no clarity there. And that's very dangerous.
Ed, in speaking of danger politically or whatever level you're talking about, have you heard any repercussions about the fact that it seems that Bibi Netanyahu took Donald Trump by the hand and walked him right up to the window of war?
Netanyahu clearly, he came here 2-3 weeks ago to clearly make the pitch for war to President Trump. And then in getting entangled in this justification for the strikes last Saturday of there being an imminent threat, Marco Rubio came up with the line that the imminent threat was to Iranian retaliation against America following an Israeli strike. I don't know whether that's remotely true or not. I'm not sure whether Netanyahu dictated Trump going to war, but it certainly looks like he influenced the timing of Trump going to war. If you look at MS Now's very good reporting on those talks that Witkoff and Kushner were conducting with Araghchi, with their Iranian counterparts in Geneva last week, it's clear that the Iranians were making a serious offer, and Witkoff and Kushner just rapidly departed the talks and mischaracterized, in Witkoff's case, what Iran had been offering. Witkoff said Iran was boasting that it could make 11 nuclear weapons within days. According to your reporting, and I have my own reasons to back that up, the Omani negotiators heard something completely different from Iran. So I think that suggests Trump planned to go to war anyway, and that these talks were really just for show. They were not serious talks. And the Americans didn't have genuine nuclear experts with them in Geneva to help them understand the Iranian offer. So that just sort of adds to the impression that Trump planned to go to war, had made his mind up quite a long time, several days ago, maybe weeks, but doesn't have a clear idea of how this war ends.
Some terrific reporting by our friend David Rohde here at MS Now. Ed, briefly, give us the sense of the reaction in the rest of the world, Europe in particular. We talked earlier in the moment of the Oval Office yesterday, the German Chancellor sort of sat alongside the president as he bashed Spain, the UK, others for their lack of commitment, a lack of help in this conflict. How else is Europe reacting?
So it's a variegated picture. I mean, Macron of France has said that this war is outside of international law, and he's been quite out front on this. Friedrich Merz, as we saw yesterday, has been more accommodating to Trump's aims and supportive of Trump's aims. And Keir Starmer of Britain is somewhere in the middle. I mean, the guy's not in a comfortable place. He denied British air bases, RAF bases in Britain, and in Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean to American bombers, but is now allowing them for defensive actions. So it's a kind of nuanced position that expresses his acute discomfort. I think Spain, of course, is under Pedro Sanchez. He's the most senior left-wing leader in Europe, has called this war a game of Russian roulette. And a disaster, and Trump has made it clear he wants to make an example of Spain. So I think the only thing in common amongst these varying European and Canadian reaction, by the way, from Mark Carney being supportive and now less supportive, is that public opinion in all these countries, both sides of the Atlantic, is very skeptical of the legality of this war and whether there is an off-ramp. It's not positive public opinion.
No, and the nuanced position of the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Keir Starmer, has gotten the White House angry with him and Britain, and has gotten British bases bombed in the region. Apparently the Iranians and Donald Trump don't deal with nuance.
No,
well,
there's not
on their separate sides.
Kind of an understatement.
You're for us or you're against us is pretty
U.S.
much how
national
it goes.
editor at the Financial Times, Ed Luce, as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed,
for coming on this morning. And Ed's new piece is online right now. You can take a look at it. And still ahead on Morning Joe, we'll get to the Senate primary results out of Texas. Democratic state lawmaker James Talerico won his race last night, but Republicans are preparing for another 3 months of mudslinging as incumbent Senator John Cornyn and Attorney General Ken Paxton head for a runoff. And a reminder that you can subscribe to our newsletter, The Tea, spilled by Morning Joe, by scanning the QR code on your screen. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back. "26 past the hour, the closely watched Republican Senate primary in Texas is not over yet. Incumbent Senator John Cornyn maintains a slight lead over Attorney General Ken Paxton, according to an Associated Press projection. Both will now advance to a May 26th runoff, since neither got more than 50% of the vote. Congressman Wesley Hunt finished a distant third. President Trump declined to endorse any of the Republican candidates. As for the Democrats, the AP projects State Representative James Talerico as the winner in the party's primary battle for U.S. Senate, with roughly 53% of the vote, defeating Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. That prediction comes following a complication with polling sites in Dallas County yesterday that prevented some votes from being immediately counted. Joining us now, political reporter at Semaphore, Dave Weigel, and writer-at-large for the New York Times, Elizabeth Buemiller. David Drucker is still with us as well.
Elizabeth Buemiller, a lot of people looking at James Talerico as the future of the Democratic Party. It seems this happens every 2 to 4 years in the state of Texas, and then a Democrat loses statewide. Will this be any different? Is there any reason, looking at trends, to think that this may be different?
It could be. It's the great hope of Democrats. It depends on who he is going to be running against, of course, in November. But it's, you know, in a party that's divided between, you know, the AOCs, the Mamdanis, the progressives, exciting the younger people, and then the more traditional Democrats, more centrist. I mean, right now, what works in New York does not work many other places in the United States, and so I think Talerico is a sign of where the Democrats are going in 2026. I was just in Virginia interviewing Abigail Spanberger, who's one of the classic centrists, and you know she won that state, as we know, by 15 points. That was a big win for Democrats. So Democrats, I think, are looking at Talerico as a way to go forward in 2026. You know, moderate Democrats often do very, very well.
And especially hopeful that Ken Paxton would win on the other side. Democrats like that matchup better. David Drucker. So let's look at that side of this race. On the Republican side, we're going to a runoff. So you get about 2.5 more months of this race. A lot more money going to be poured into that race. We still don't have an endorsement for either candidate here from Donald Trump. Do you expect that to change? Do you think Donald Trump intervenes at this point? Does he listen to people like John Thune, who have been asking him, please, we need John Cornyn to be the nominee so that we hold on to this seat and we can protect your majority? Or is there still MAGA energy, enough MAGA energy around Ken Paxton to propel him forward?
Well, look, I mean, there's definitely enough MAGA energy around Paxton to move him. I think the question is how's the president going to look at this? Because he likes Paxton, because Paxton likes him. And he doesn't have any beef with Cornyn, even though Cornyn has been occasionally critical. But what does Trump care about the most? He cares about winning. And he doesn't want to back somebody who goes on to lose in the primary. And I think, the way a lot of Republicans are looking at this race, and I think with good reason, is that even if it's Paxton, there's still a good chance that he wins anyway. Now, let me just unpack that a little bit. The fact that Cornyn is finishing as well as he is in round one against Paxton is very important for him, because it means that Republican resources are going to continue to flow to Cornyn, because Paxton is potentially vulnerable in November, even though a lot of us who have covered Texas for a long time are skeptical and are holding our sort of fire, if you will, on the idea that this race is going to ultimately be competitive. But the resources will flow, and the Majority Leader John Thune and others in Trump's ear have a better case to make that if you endorse Cornyn, it can put him over the top and just put this race to bed for November. Because if Cornyn's the nominee, Talerico is very dynamic. He's stylistically, I think, the better candidate than Crockett. He's not going to beat John Cornyn. And so there's an argument to make there, and that's why this finish was so important. Had Cornyn been trailing by 5 points, 10 points or more, the resources might have just dried up, because everybody would have said this is a losing battle. Incumbents tend to lose runoffs anyway. And then on the other side of this, you have to look at Talerico and say, yes, he's stylistically the better candidate. He's dynamic. He's interesting. He's going to raise a lot of money, particularly if Paxton's the nominee. But if he wants to have a chance to win this race in a state as red as Texas, notwithstanding the environment, he's going to have to offer something on policy to make soft Republicans and swing voters feel like he's not too progressive for their taste, and I have yet to see him do that.
John Lemire, I've been talking to John Heilman off and on since last night and this morning, and they're just sort of, I will say, Cornyn, I think, overperformed. Senator Cornyn overperformed. I early on thought Paxton was going to probably get more votes, but now people are just assuming Cornyn's going to win. But if I were a Cornyn supporter, there'd be a lot of alarm bells going off right now. First of all, he's an establishment figure. Secondly, this is a runoff, and I know better than anybody. I lost my initial primary. I won my runoff easily first time I ran because I was crazy. Well, I still am. I exaggerated a little bit, but I was intense, man. And I had the base following me. And I knew if I got in the runoff, I'd win the runoff, because the most driven people vote in the runoff. I'd be worried about that if I were Cornyn. Also, something else that you can speak to very well, the 2020 election. Ken Paxton led Texans in stirring up bullshit and conspiracy theories in 2020 for Donald Trump. Ted Cruz supported stirring up the conspiracy theories, the unproven conspiracy theories. John Cornyn did not, and he called them unproven. And he voted to actually, go along with the 2020 election. I'm just curious, John, you wrote the book on the big lie, and you follow the president. Is there any issue that's more important to him on a loyalty test than where people fell in the 2020 election? And if that's the case, I understand he wants to win Texas, but how in the world does he not endorse the guy who lied the most for him in 2020 and vote and endorse instead John Cornyn, a guy who said, no, those theories are all unproven?
You're exactly right. It's a real litmus test and a dilemma for Trump, because the 2020 big lie is still at the heart of so much what he's talking about to this day. He's still talking about it now and raising fears about what would happen in 26 and 28. Congressman Dan Crenshaw, who also spoke out against the Stop the Steal effort, lost a Republican primary yesterday in Texas. So he will be out. He crossed Trump. Cornyn also disagreed with Trump. So, yes, it's true. There's a lot of political people. Trump's advisors are saying Cornyn's the safest pick, Dave Weigel, because they believe he has a better shot to win in the general election. I have been talking to advisors in the last couple of days who say there's some momentum for Trump to do that. And I think David Drucker is right that if Cornyn had lost even by any number, maybe Trump can't, but because he's more or less pulled even, he could justify it and say, I'll put you over the top. but I'm not 100% sure he will for all the points that Joe just raised. And Democrats are simply salivating at the possibility of taking on Paxton.
Yes, and they're happy enough that there's going to be a very long runoff. The nightmare scenario for Republicans was what was being described before, which was Cornyn being far down. It's not ideal for them. The Democrats have settled their primary. Talerico is going to go on a media tour, make a ton of money, and talk about the chaos on the Republican side. I'd add one Republican to the names you were listing. Chip Roy was running for Attorney General, still running for Attorney General. He's in a runoff, but he came in a very, very distant second to Mays Middleton, a state legislator who ran against, among other things, Chip Roy not supporting Stop the Steal in 2020. So the party Republicans, in every chance they had in this primary to move to the right with their choices, with the exception of Cornyn, they made that choice. And the Talerico argument, which I think got lost a little bit as the race became more combative, is actually very populist. It's very combative. It's that Republicans and corporations and the corporate capture of the Trump administration are trying to take away people's democracy, people's rights. Now, he's very attackable. Republicans have already kind of been using the material they were holding off when they were hoping Crockett would win. But the ability he had to turn people out over Crockett, the final point I make about this is comparable to the turnout Democrats had in their 2022 Super Tuesday Texas primary. If Crockett was running for president in 2020, she would have won that primary. She got more than 1 million votes. Crockett increased, but both of them increased the turnout. But Talerico has blown away every projection Democrats have for turnout in the suburbs of Houston, the suburbs of Dallas, and in the greater Austin area. It was hard to poll for that reason. Are those voters going to look at a 10-week Republican primary and say, oh, I love that party. I really can't wait to send more of those guys back to help Donald Trump out? The Democrats think less so than they would have 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. You know, Talerico is such an interesting candidate. He could be such a strong candidate in the general, especially since his message, Elizabeth Buehmiller, is so rooted in his religion and the Bible. And he constantly calls out Trump Republican hypocrisy on many of these issues that are directly related to his religion. So I want to go back to a point that you made earlier about how well he might do in the general, depending on who he runs against. Does it really matter who he runs against in terms of the strength so far that we've seen?
I think so. I think, Texas is a very tough state, and I think that he's very inclusive. He speaks the language of God. That goes over very well in Texas. It could bring in a lot of, independent voters, more moderate Republicans. But I think running against Paxton would be better because Paxton has such a tough record, and you see from Cornyn they're already in the primary. They're threatening a new wave of attacks about his cheating and all of his transgressions, and that also will go over well in Texas or not go over well in Texas. So I think running against Paxton would be better for the Democrats. But he's a really interesting candidate. It's sort of another kind of Democrat. It's going to be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, Cornyn, though, is older. He's part of the status quo. So I don't know.
Well, and that's where a Donald Trump endorsement is so extraordinarily important for either one of these candidates. Dan Crenshaw last night, I think the only incumbent Texan Republican running that didn't get Donald Trump's endorsement, and he lost. So if Donald Trump endorses Cornyn, it would make a huge difference. And I will say this, if he endorsed Paxton, I think game over.
Wow. Writer at large for the New York Times, Elizabeth Buehmiller, politics reporter for Semaphore, Dave Weigel, and David Drucker of the Dispatch. Thank you all so much for coming on this morning. And coming up on Morning Joe, according to AAA, the average cost of a gallon of gas in the U.S. has risen 16 cents in the week after President Trump touted falling fuel prices in his State of the Union address. Steve Ratner joins us with charts looking at how the war with Iran is costing American consumers. Morning Joe will be right back. All right, 44 past the hour. Live look at the White House. Global gas prices have soared this week amid fears of a lengthy disruption to the world's most critical choke point for oil shipments, which have effectively stalled as the threat of attacks from Iran has deterred vessels from passing through the Strait of Hormuz. For more on the war's impact on global energy supplies, let's bring in former Treasury official and Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Ratner.
Steve, the president talked about keeping the straits open. I'm curious, how important is that to the oil flow across the world?
It's critically important, Joe. So let's just take a look at a map to orient people. First, here's a map of the Middle East. Here's the Strait of Hormuz right here. It is about 22 miles wide, but there are only 2 shipping lanes of about 2 miles wide. You can see Iran is right here, so they can obviously control the straits if they want to. Here, all the big oil-producing countries in the region, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates. And so these straits are effectively closed at the moment because it's too dangerous and because insurance companies won't insure tankers going through there. Trump has talked about using the Navy to open it up. That's something that they actually did back in the 1980s. Whether this will happen again remains to be seen. But for right now, oil is not coming out of here. There are pipelines out of there. There's one across here. There's one over here that were basically built to reduce the reliance on the Strait of Hormuz, but they can't carry nearly enough oil, so it's piling up in here. How important is it? Really important. Saudi Arabia, as you know, is a huge oil producer. Virtually all their oil goes through the Strait of Hormuz, except for this piece that goes across the pipeline. Iraq, UAE, Iran, which sells its oil to China at the moment because we've embargoed it, Kuwait, and Qatar all go through there. It's a total of about 20% of the world's oil, so it is a huge amount.
And because of that, it's going to have an impact on oil prices, gas prices down. So we look at your second chart, just looking this morning, $78.50 a barrel for Brent crude right now. It had been as high as 81. What is the impact of that on what people pay at the pump?
It's already having an impact on what people pay at the pump. So you can see here, oil prices were actually rising a bit already. For a variety of reasons, including the tensions in the Middle East that scared the markets. But then, of course, you had this big jump, as you just articulated, Willie, and that has already turned into higher gas prices. You can see this line is gas, this reddish color line. The blue line is crude oil, and you can see that gas has already gone from $2.98 to $3.11 just in the last 4 days across the country. So that's the bad news. The good news for us is that we're not going to see gas lines again like in 1973, because we have gone from being a huge importer of oil, net importer of oil, to actually being a net exporter of oil. We import some, we export some, but on balance, we export more than we import. So supply is not our problem. But because oil is a worldwide commodity, it trades at a worldwide price, we do feel the impact on prices, but we shouldn't feel the impact on supply.
All right, so let's move to your third chart, which gets at inflation. Obviously something that's been a persistent problem, but this obviously not helping with that either.
Right, and remember, it's also not just gasoline that goes up in price, it's everything else that comes from petroleum, which includes jet fuel, home heating oil, things that go into petrochemicals that are made from petroleum. So there could be a significant inflationary impact. This is what the market expects inflation to be. And you can see, again, it was already moving up. The economy was a bit stronger. Oil prices were moving up. Then it looked like it was easing off, and now it's jumped again up here. It's gone up about 0.15%. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it's going in the wrong direction. But the bigger impact of that, or a big impact of that, is on expectations for interest rates. Because the Fed has a 2% inflation target, when it goes up like that, people expect interest rates to remain higher for longer. So just in the last few days since the attack, interest rates have moved up as you can see here, from the yellow to the red. And so as you also see, the stock market has been wobbly. Why has the stock market been wobbly? Partly, obviously, because of all this international uncertainty, potential for a wider war, et cetera, but also because higher interest rates are the enemy of stock prices, because they provide other places for people to put their money besides stocks, which then puts pressure on stocks. So all of this is part of why the stock market has been so wobbly in the past few days. And of course, higher inflation and remaining so far above the Fed's inflation target is also worrisome for economic policy.
Steve, Wall Street clearly does not like unpredictability or uncertainty. No one does. But on the global stage, there's no way of telling how long we will be actively involved on a daily basis in a war in Iran. What happens if this war lengthens out in terms of the United States' presence and participation in that war? What happens to those charts behind you right now?
A lot of bad things, Mike, a lot of bad things. The oil prices could spike some more. As I said, I don't think it affects our supply, but it affects the prices people pay at the pump and for their home heating oil and even for their natural gas, because a lot of natural gas also passes through the Straits of Hormuz. And so then you get more inflation, you get the potential for higher interest rates, you get the uncertainty and the fear of what could happen. And yeah, all that is really bad for the stock market. The stock market's reaction so far has actually been quite muted. It was down about 1% yesterday. It looks like it'll open about flat today. That's a pretty benign reaction given everything that could have happened. But the potential for a much bigger stock market disruption is certainly right there if this war were to widen out or if something unexpectedly bad were to happen to us, to our troops, to the whole Middle Eastern situation.
And these things do happen in war, unplanned events. Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Ratner with his charts again this morning. Steve, thanks so much as always. Still ahead on Morning Joe, top Pentagon officials expected to hold another press conference right here at the top of the hour on where things stand, the war in Iran. We'll bring you those live remarks just as soon as they begin. Morning Joe, back in a moment.
5 minutes before the top of the hour, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Gnome returns to Capitol Hill later this morning to appear before the House Judiciary Committee. We'll show you the contentious moments from her testimony yesterday before the Senate. And moments from now, we expect a briefing from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, on the latest out of the war with Iran. We'll bring you that briefing live as soon as it starts. Stay with us. Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
I guess the worst case would be we do this and then somebody takes over who's as bad as the previous person, right? That could happen. We don't want that to happen. That would probably be the worst. You go through this and then in 5 years you realize you put somebody in who was no better.
President Trump yesterday, when asked about what the worst case scenario could be with Iran, the U.S. government is urging Americans in the Middle East to leave as the war with Iran enters its 5th day. However, many are having trouble finding a way out. And the American embassies in Jerusalem and Qatar say they are unable to help citizens evacuate. So far today, Israel has announced it is carrying out a, quote, broad wave of strikes targeting Iran's infrastructure. Israel has also continued to carry out strikes against Iranian-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon. Meanwhile, the head of the United States Central Command said last night that the American military continues to carry out strikes in Iran 24/7. Admiral Brad Cooper said the U.S. and Israel have jointly struck nearly 2,000 targets with more than 2,000 munitions since the start of the war. And we have learned the names of the first 4 service members killed in action. They are Sergeant First Class Noah Tegens of Nebraska, Sergeant First Class Nicole Amore of Minnesota, Captain Cody Cork of Florida, and Sergeant Declan Cody of Iowa. The 4 Army Reserve soldiers were killed by a drone strike in Kuwait on Sunday.
And the country mourns their loss. All of this coming as President Trump pushed back yesterday on claims that Israel led the United States into the war with Iran. Earlier this week, Secretary of State Marco Rubio suggested the U.S. faced an imminent threat in part because Israel was going to attack Iran, and Iran would then hit back at U.S. forces. Here's how President Trump responded when asked about that yesterday in the Oval Office.
Did Israel force your hand to launch these strikes against Iran? Did Netanyahu pull the United States into this war?
No, I might have forced their hand. You see, we were having negotiations with these lunatics, and it was my opinion that they were going to attack first. They were going to attack. If we didn't do it, they were going to attack first. I felt strongly about that. And We have great negotiators, great people, people that do this very successfully and have done it all their lives very successful. And based on the way the negotiation was going, I think they were going to attack first. And I didn't want that to happen. So if anything, I might have forced Israel's hand. But Israel was ready and we were ready, and we've had a very, very powerful impact because virtually everything they have has been knocked out now.
Mike, Secretary Rubio tried to clarify his remarks yesterday, saying the Israel piece was only a part of the reason that they attacked and one of the, perhaps the ramifications of an attack. So we're still fishing around, it seems, in this administration for the justification. Actually, Mike, I'm going to cut myself off here. We're going to go to the briefing at the Pentagon with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane.
With one unmistakable message about Operation Epic Fury. America is winning decisively, devastatingly, and without mercy. Under the direct command of President Trump, the War Department unleashed this operation early Saturday morning, just 4 days ago, which means we need to remember two things. First, we are only 4 days into this. Metrics are shifting, dust is settling, and more forces are arriving. It's very early. And as President Trump has said, we will take all the time we need to make sure that we succeed. Second, we are only 4 days into this, and the results have been incredible. Historic, really. Only the United States of America could lead this, only us. But when you add the Israeli Defense Forces, a devastatingly capable force, the combination is sheer destruction for our radical Islamist Iranian adversaries. They are toast, and they know it. Or at least, soon enough, they will know it. And we have only just begun to hunt, dismantle, demoralize, destroy, and defeat their capabilities, just 4 days in. Starting last night and to be completed in a few days, in under a week, the two most powerful air forces in the world will have complete control of Iranian skies, uncontested airspace. I hope all the folks watching understand what uncontested airspace and complete control means. It means we will fly all day, all night, day and night, finding, fixing, and finishing the missiles and defense industrial base of the Iranian military, finding and fixing their leaders and their military leaders, flying over Tehran, flying over Iran, flying over their capital, flying over the IRGC, Iranian leaders looking up and seeing only U.S. and Israeli air power every minute of every day until we decide it's over. And Iran will be able to do nothing about it. B-2s, B-52s, B-1s, Predator drones, fighters, controlling the skies, picking targets. Death and destruction from the sky all day long. We're playing for keeps. Our warfighters have maximum authorities granted personally by the president and yours truly. Our rules of engagement are bold, precise, and designed to unleash American power, not shackle it. This was never meant to be a fair fight, and it is not a fair fight. We are punching them while they're down, which is exactly how it should be. Thus far, Operation Epic Fury has delivered twice the air power of shock and awe of Iraq in 2003, minus Paul Bremer and the nation building. The campaign has 7 times the intensity of Israel's previous operations against Iran during the 12-day war, 7 times. And as President Trump said, more and larger waves are coming. We are just getting started. We are accelerating, not decelerating. Iran's capabilities are evaporating by the hour, while American strength grows fiercer, smarter, and utterly dominant. More bombers and more fighters are arriving just today. And now, with complete control of the skies, we will be using 500-pound, 1,000-pound, and 2,000-pound GPS and laser-guided precision gravity bombs of which we have a nearly unlimited stockpile. We used more exquisite standoff munitions at the start, but no longer need to. Our stockpiles of those, as well as Patriots, remains extremely strong. The enemy can no longer shoot the volume of missiles they once did, not even close. And the chairman will lay out some of those percentages. So our air defenses and that of our allies have plenty of runway. We can sustain this fight easily for as long as we need to. And as I said yesterday, we set the terms. Now, you may not see much of it because the IRGC shut off the internet to the entirety of the country. They blind their people on purpose, just like they kill their own on purpose. Much was made of the volume of missiles Iran was able to shoot in the first few days. And sadly, as we projected, a few got through and killed 6 of our best, who will hopefully arrive home soon. We will avenge them, no doubt. But I liken Iran's predicament to a football team who scripted the first 20 plays of a game. The team knew what plays to run because their first few drives were scripted. But now that the game has started and the blitz is on, they don't know what plays to call, let alone how to get in the huddle and call those plays. Iran's senior leaders are dead. The so-called governing council that might have selected a successor, dead, missing, or cowering in bunkers, too terrified to even occupy the same room. Senior generals, mid-level officers, enlisted ranks, they can't talk or communicate, let alone mount a coordinated and sustained offensive. That's not great for morale. The Iranian Air Force is no more, built for 1996, destroyed in 2026. The Iranian Navy rests at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. Combat ineffective, decimated, destroyed, defeated, pick your adjective. In fact, last night, we sunk their prize ship, the Soleimani. Looks like POTUS got him twice. Their Navy, not a factor. Pick your adjective, it is no more. In fact, yesterday, in the Indian Ocean, and we'll play it on the screen there, an American submarine sunk an Iranian warship that thought it was safe in international waters. Instead, it was sunk by a torpedo. Quiet death. The first sinking of an enemy ship by a torpedo since World War II. Like in that war, back when we were still the War Department, we are fighting to win. Also, yesterday, the leader of the unit who attempted to assassinate President Trump has been hunted down and killed. Iran tried to kill President Trump, and President Trump got the last laugh. Now, this is not a mission accomplished situation. This is simply a reality check. The combination of U.S. and Israeli intelligence and combat power will control Iran, and will control it soon. Sure, Iran will still be able to shoot some missiles and still be able to launch one-way attack drones at civilian targets, and their proxies will attempt to attack our embassies, bases, and soft targets. They are terrorists, after all, and they need to target civilians because they can't fight toe-to-toe. But we will find them, and we will kill them. This is what the fake news misses. We've taken control of Iran's airspace and waterways without boots on the ground. We control their fate. But when a few drones get through or tragic things happen, it's front page news. I get it. The press only wants to make the president look bad, but try for once to report the reality. The terms of this war will be set by us at every step. As I said Monday, the mission is laser focused. Obliterate Iran's missiles and drones and facilities that produce them, annihilate its navy and critical security infrastructure, and sever their pathway to nuclear weapons. Iran will never possess a nuclear bomb, not on our watch, not ever. And this is why President Trump's moral clarity on Iran today is so vital. Unlike the past, where vague red lines and endless negotiations let Iran fund terror and inch ever so slightly toward a bomb, this president sees the threat plainly and acts decisively. No more half measures especially when Iran is at its weakest. No more letting Tehran play for time while our people pay the price. His leadership ensures that we finish what we start and that we protect our warfighters by crushing the enemy before they can strike again. Our offensive operations, refined through months of relentless preparation, are unstoppable. And our defensive efforts are unprecedented. We have from the start put the protection of our troops ahead of everything else. Before we very publicly built up offensive combat power, we quietly ensured that our defensive posture and power was in place. And as we built up offensive combat power, we moved the vast majority of American troops, over 90% of Americans that were on our bases, what we say off the X, out of the range of Iranian fire. Our defensive shield is equally formidable, the most sophisticated air and missile defense network ever fielded. Thousands of Iranian missiles and drones have been intercepted and vaporized. Tens of thousands of American and allied lives protected. We have pushed every counter-UAS system possible forward, sparing no expense or capability. And like I said, this does not mean we can stop everything, but we ensured that the maximum possible defense and maximum possible force protection was set up before we went on offense. In closing, as President Trump told German Chancellor Merz yesterday, Iran negotiated in bad faith, stalling, scheming, and preparing to strike. And we acted decisively to defend our people, our interests, and our allies. President Trump took bold action, putting America first, the kind of bold action that the American people elected him to execute. To our steadfast partner, Israel, your mission is being executed with unmatched skill and iron determination. Fighting shoulder to shoulder with such a capable ally is a true force multiplier and a breath of fresh air. We salute your courage and your contribution. 4 days in, we have only just begun to fight. America fights to win, and in Operation Epic Fury, we are. May God's providence cover and protect our troops always. And with that, I turn it over to the chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm here today to provide the American people and those of you in this room an update on Operation Epic Fury. First, it's with profound sadness and gratitude that I share the names of 4 of our 6 fallen heroes, all from the 103rd Sustainment Command, U.S. Army Reserves out of Des Moines, Iowa. Captain Cody Cork, Sergeant First Class Noah Tegens, Sergeant First Class Nicole Amore, and Sergeant Declan Cody. To the families of our fallen, we grieve with you today, and we look forward to welcoming your family members home at Dover in the coming days. Out of respect for the other families, we'll withhold the release of their names until next of kin notification is complete. And either myself or Admiral Cooper will release those names as soon as we can ensure that all of those families have been properly notified. To our Gold Star families, to our wounded warriors and their loved ones, we will never forget your sacrifice. Our nation stands with you, and we are eternally grateful for your courage, your resiliency, your devotion to this mission and to our nation. As the Secretary said, we're 4 days in, 103 hours into this campaign. The operation was again launched with clear military objectives designed to dismantle Iran's ability to project power outside of its borders, both today and in the future. First, we are targeting and eliminating Iran's ballistic missile systems to prevent them from threatening the U.S. Forces, partners, and interests in the region. Second, we are destroying the Iranian Navy, degrading its capacity, capability, and ability to conduct operations, not just in the Central Command AOR, but as the Secretary showed in the video, around the world. Third, we're ensuring Iran cannot rapidly rebuild or reconstitute its combat capability or combat power, and those phases will begin as the campaign continues. As of this morning, U.S. Central Command is making steady progress. Iran's theater ballistic missile shots fired are down 86% from the first day of fighting, with a 23% decrease just in the last 24 hours. And their one-way attack drone shots are down 73% from the opening days. This progress has allowed CENTCOM to establish localized air superiority across the southern flank of the Iranian coast and penetrate their defenses with overwhelming precision and firepower. We will now begin to expand inland, striking progressively deeper into Iranian territory and creating additional freedom of maneuver for U.S. forces. Let me explain a little bit about how we're thinking about staying ahead of the enemy. First, over the past several weeks, Admiral Cooper and the CENTCOM team have refined their operational approach to the region. Their planners identified key centers of gravity that would allow Iran to project power outside of its borders. They thought about how to isolate critical vulnerabilities and determined where, with precision, the greatest strategic effect could be achieved. As a result of this, CENTCOM is now shifting in day 4 already from large deliberate strike packages using standoff munitions at range outside an enemy's ability to shoot at us, now into stand-in precision strikes overhead Iran. As the Secretary said, this is a point of munitions transition from standoff munitions to stand-in munitions like joint direct attack munitions, which are GPS-aided free-fall weapons, and other things like Hellfires, etc. This will allow the joint force to deliver significantly increased precision effects on the target. The throttle is coming up, as the Secretary said, as opposed to ramping down. This will allow us to maintain consistent pressure on the adversary over the coming days, disrupt their launch timelines, and impose cost every day around the clock. I know there have been a lot of questions about munitions. We have sufficient precision munitions for the task at hand, both on the offense and defense. But I want to tell you, teammates, as a matter of practice, I don't want to be talking about quantities. And I know there's been a great debate about that, and I appreciate the interest, but just know that we consider that an operational security matter. Let me flip to the map here. Hopefully I don't kill anybody with a laser pointer. As I mentioned earlier, and for you with the camera right there, my friend, I hope I don't ricochet off and hurt you. Over the initial days, the U.S. Joint Forces continued to attack and attrit ballistic missile capabilities as well as integrated air defense capabilities along the southern axis. Along the northern axis, Israel and the Israeli Air Force has predominantly been working integrated defense targets along the northern flank, as well as medium-range ballistic missile capability as well. From the sea, the USS Ford has continued to project combat power here, as well as the bomber pulses that we talked about in the opening days of this briefing. Along the southern axis, the USS Abraham Lincoln Strike Group has continued to provide pressure from the sea along the southeastern side of the coast and has been attriting naval capability all along the strait and up into the Arabian Gulf at a size and scale sufficiently to address the targets required. To date, we've hit over 2,000 targets, as Admiral Cooper said in his video last night. We've destroyed more than 20 Iranian naval vessels, including, in addition to the frigate outside of the area, one submarine, and effectively neutralized at this point in time Iran's major naval presence in theater out there. As the Secretary showed the video, for the first time since 1945, a United States Navy fast attack submarine has sunk an enemy combatant ship using a single Mark 48 torpedo to achieve immediate effect, sending the warship to the bottom of the sea. I want to remind everybody that this is an incredible demonstration of America's global reach. To hunt, find, and kill an out-of-area deployer is something that only the United States can do at this type of scale. Over the next 24 to 48 hours, CENTCOM will continue to strike infrastructure and naval capability, and we'll continue to assess our progress against the military objectives. It does take time for us to collect that information and to assess en route. Much of our intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capability is currently hunting and killing ballistic missile launchers and one-way attack capability. We're precise in that assessment, and we call balls and strikes in that assessment. We take that matter seriously. Iran, on the other hand, has been indiscriminate and more imprecise in their attacks. They fired more than 500 ballistic missiles and more than 2,000 drones, striking innocent civilian targets throughout the region. Our partners are answering the call to defend themselves right alongside us. Jordan, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait are all defending their people with their own combat capability, with precision and restraint. Jordanian air defense crews recently intercepted a cluster of Iranian one-way attack drones headed to Amman. Bahrain's air defense forces shot down an inbound drone approaching Manama's maritime infrastructure, protecting both their population and critical shipping lanes. Saudi Patriot batteries stopped a salvo of ballistic missiles aimed at energy facilities near Dhahran. The UAE neutralized multiple drones targeting Abu Dhabi's industrial zone, demonstrating speed and precision. And Qatari fighters for the first time have shot down 2 Iranian bombers that were en route to their location. Together, these nations are helping to defend themselves and project power as required against the enemy. We're 100 hours in. It's still very early, as the Secretary said, but the balance is shifting. We've always got to remember that these operations are complex, dangerous, and far from over. Our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Guardians, and Coast Guardsmen remain in harm's way, and we must be clear-eyed that the risk is still high. This is combat. Let us never forget this. As we continue, I ask that we hold all of our deployed teammates in our thoughts, those standing the watch, flying the sorties, sustaining the fight, and carrying our nation's burden. And I'll stop where I started, and that's remembering our 6 fallen who will return home as soon as possible. I remain humbled, grateful, inspired by every day the valor and professionalism of our joint force. They are quiet professionals through and through, out there doing America's work through the day and through the darkness. And with that, I'll take your questions along with the Secretary.
Go ahead.
What do you assess the enemy's control and command status is right now? And can you broadly describe our decisive point in this operation?
Well, I won't describe the decisive point in the operation because that would tell the bad guys what it was.
That's a good question, though.
I appreciate the question. Their C2 structures in a bad way. Admiral Cooper's been continuing to pressure C2 at the IRGC C2 and other military elements, and will continue to do so. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Secretary Hegseth. Mary Margaret with the Daily Wire. Couple questions for you and then one for General Kane. Can you tell us more about how we took out the leader who was the leader of the group that was trying to assassinate President Trump? And then Turkey's defense ministry says NATO air defense systems intercepted an Iranian ballistic missile headed towards Turkish airspace. Could this trigger NATO's Article 5, and was it the U.S. who shot it down?
On the first question, we've known for a long time that Iran had intentions on trying to kill President Trump and or other U.S. Officials. And while that was not the focus of the effort by any stretch of the imagination, in fact, never raised by the president or anybody else, I ensured and others ensured that those who were responsible for that were eventually part of the target list. It wasn't the beginning of the effort. We were focused on missiles and launchers, and that's the focus. But ultimately, if we had the opportunity to get at those who are trying to get at Americans specifically, we would. And so we eventually had the opportunity to do that from the air. And then on the matter with Turkey, I'll have to get back to you on exactly what the intercept looked like at that. We're aware of that particular engagement, although no sense that it would trigger anything like Article 5. No. Tie, right there. You got a tie on.
Yeah. Thank you. Tom Bateman with the BBC. Can you give us an update on what the administration knows, what you know now about the reported strike on a girls' school in southern Iran on Saturday?
All I can say is that we're investigating that. We, of course, never target civilian targets, but we're taking a look and investigating that. Red tie in front.
Just on the basis that with the information you would have, your reconnaissance abilities, ability to gather information, I mean, it's several days on now. So is there any clarity on whose munition this was?
We're investigating it. Thank you.
Secretary, so there are reports that the administration is considering arming Iranian Kurdish groups. So could you please clarify that whether any such plan has been authorized and whether Congress or regional partners has been notified and consulted?
All I would say is none of our objectives are premised on the support or the arming of any particular force. So what other entities may be doing, we're aware of, but our objectives aren't centered on that. Green, right there.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mike Lynn, Washington Times. Can you talk a little bit about the deconfliction process that's going on? You have two parallel operations, Epic Fury and Roaring Lion. How are you making sure they're not interfering with each other?
Sure, I'm happy to take that. Thank you for the question. We have liaison officers on both sides. There are U.S. CENTCOM teammates out in Israel, and there are Israeli Defense Force teammates at the relevant command and control nodes within the U.S. CENTCOM enterprise. Routinely, Admiral Cooper is talking to the IDF Chief of Defense, and I will occasionally speak to him through the arc of this. I've spoken to him a few times already. That allows us to coordinate, integrate, and synchronize activities while maintaining separate efforts.
And when I said a breath of fresh air, I really meant it. Usually it's us with some ancillary benefits from allies who are maybe willing but not as capable. When you have both the will and the capability of an ally that can really bring things to bear, we take certain targets, they take certain targets, and when you coordinate it, it has incredible effects. Right here.
Secretary Hegseth, with respect to House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries' statement that the Iran mission will end in failure, what kind of message does that send to our enemies, and what does it do to the motivation of our troops?
Well, I've been through that movie before with the Democrats rooting against the country. Our generation saw that in our battlefields. I think it's pretty unprecedented and unfortunate that it would occur 4 days in to an operation where, as the chairman laid out, America's best are operating in an incredibly challenging environment where they're having incredible success, but they're meeting a determined adversary. And he's been privy to briefs that we've provided. He knows how effective this has been. He's being disingenuous, which we're used to. Right here.
Thank you for taking my question. Heather Mullins, Lindell TV. One of the questions I have is just really regarding the intelligence that indicated that this was something the U.S. had to get involved with at the time that you guys did. We had Operation Midnight Hammer back in June. We obliterated their nuclear facilities. What was the intelligence that suggested that somehow they became a threat once again that required us to get involved with Operation Epic Fury?
I appreciate the question. The evidence in front of us since the 12-day war was that Iran had no intention of actually negotiating a nuclear deal that truly meant they did not have a pathway to the nuclear bomb. And they had a moment. Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, two of the best negotiators in the world, poured into that negotiation, giving them every single possible opportunity to release that ambition, and they didn't. And the intelligence that we saw they didn't intend to do it in good faith, that they had the intentions eventually to get to a place where they could have a conventional shield to block their nuclear capabilities, as I talked about yesterday. So I would separate the what from the when a little bit. The what is they've been killing Americans for 47 years. They have thousands of missiles pointed at us. They have ongoing nuclear ambitions, and they're at the weakest they've ever been. So the when became in a particular, hey, what makes the most sense to do this to ensure that the narrow objectives we have of ensuring they never have a nuclear weapon have a maximum effect? Yes, right here.
Thank you, Secretary Hegseth. I had two questions. First, what is your message to Iran's allies, namely Russia and China, who have called for an immediate end to hostilities?
I don't have a message for them, and they're not really a factor here. And our issue is not with them. It's with the nuclear ambitions of Iran.
Absolutely. And are any so-called fully autonomous weapons or other AI tools being used in Operation Epic Fury?
We've got a lot of autonomous systems or systems that drones and others incorporated with smart AI aspects to them, but a lot of which I can't talk about here. Yeah. Yellow, right there. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. As you know, China is accusing the United States of invading in Iran, a sovereign nation, and North Korea, which cooperate with Iran on nuclear development, has declared its commitment to protecting Iran. What is the United States' strategic response to this? And I have a second one. How many allies join with the United States to fighting against Iran? Do you have any numbers?
Well, I think what you're seeing right now is a response in the region to the belligerence of Iran and the willingness of them to target civilian airports, civilian hotels, civilian locations, civilian oil infrastructure of their Gulf neighbors who would have preferred not to be in conflict, didn't want to, but now realize that this is something that has to be dealt with. So whether it's UAE or Qatar or Bahrain or Kuwait or Saudi, on different levels, they're reaching out to us, whether they're going on offense, which they are, whether they're giving us additional access, basing, and overflight. We're working very closely and collaborating with them. Also on air defenses. The air defense capabilities of those countries are significant, and when combined with ours and we coordinate, it brings simplicity to the shot doctrine, so we make sure we're using less munitions but being more effective with what we shoot at. And as it pertains to other countries, I'll sort of give the same question. They don't really bear on the case of Iran. We're going to deal with Iran's nuclear ambitions, and that will send plenty of signals in the process. Right there. Purple.
Are you going to help get Americans out of the region? The military going to help? Secretary, I have two questions. One question for you and the other question for Mr. Chairman. You ruled out that you are not engaging with the Kurdish forces, Iranian Kurdish forces, to incursion from the Kurdistan region to Iran. But now and today, Iranian said that under threatening the Kurdistan region, they said clearly if there is any incursion from the Kurdistan region, they will attack all the Kurdistan region and go war with the Kurdistan region. What's your comment on that? And a question for Mr. Chairman, given comments that the U.S. forces might be deployed if necessary, under what specific conditions would you determine that deploying U.S. boots on the ground is necessary, and how would such a decision support and advance your stated strategic goals?
Well, I'm not going to comment on U.S. boots on the ground. I think that's a question for policymakers, and I don't make policy, I execute policy. I will say on the question in the back corner about helping Americans get out, first, it's a great opportunity to encourage everybody in the region to go to the State Department and register. Secretary Rubio's been trying to get that word out, and I'd ask you to help us with that, to have folks register. We've also opened up space available seats as C-17s and other airplanes come in to try to help folks get out. But that's really a State Department matter. But to answer your question, that's what we've been doing.
Absolutely. Last question right here.
Secretary Hegseth, thank you. Reagan Reese with the Daily Caller. You touched on this in your opening remarks, but I'm hoping you could expand on it a bit. It's been reported that Iran might be trying to outlast our ability to intercept their missiles. It sounds like you guys are saying they don't have the ability to do so. Is that the case? Can they outlast us in their ability to do that?
Iran cannot outlast us. We're going to ensure through violence of action and our offensive capabilities and our defensive capabilities, as I said, that we set the tone and the tempo of this fight. That's why stories and speculation about different things that try to make it look like we're limited in what we can do. The only limits we have in this is President Trump's desire to achieve specific effects on behalf of the American people. And that's why we don't talk about, you can say 4 weeks, but it could be 6, it could be 8, it could be 3. Ultimately, we set the pace and the tempo. The enemy is off balance, and we're going to keep them off balance. And we know their ability to shoot versus our ability to defend. That difference gets wider and wider every day. Our defense gets better, their offense capabilities diminish. As we are going into ammunitions that we, as we said, have tens of thousands of and can drop unlimited supplies on, with even more effects than the standoff emissions we have now, which is why when we say the throttle's going up, the throttle's going up, and it's going to stay on high. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
All right. That is Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, along with Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane, giving an update on the ongoing war with Iran. Honestly, Pete Hegseth with a rather childish childish litany of accomplishments about a very serious issue, war with Iran. Talking about how American forces would deliver death and destruction all day long to Iran. He got into some of the details, but again, a lot of rhetoric about death and destruction and power, and no real reasoning on what the immediate threat was. He was actually asked about intelligence by Lindell TV, and he described the intelligence leading up to the war, to the first strikes, as Iran had the intentions eventually to do bad things. To be clear, eventual is not immediate. So there was no answers on what the immediate threat was, which is what a lot of people want to know. Like, what was it that triggered this without going to Congress? We then got a much more detailed and serious assessment of the situation from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane, who started off where most would, which is expressing gratitude and grief over the fallen service members who have died so far, 4 days and 103 hours into this campaign. He did list off the accomplishments so far, saying that they have eliminated Iran's ballistic missile systems. They're in the process of assuring Iran cannot rebuild its combat power as this campaign continues, and it will continue as they progress deeper into Iran. They've destroyed much of Iran's Navy and Air Force. And he talked a lot about also how the Gulf states, United Arab Emirates and Qatar, have been helping push back against Iran's retaliation, and touched on the fact that Americans are trying to get out of the region, and they're trying to help, but not much more on that. Joining us now, MS Now senior national security reporter David Rode, who's been watching this as well. David, what questions were you left with on this, and any indications of where this goes next from what we heard?
I had the same questions about no real explanation about why this had to happen now as you. He brought up something that we've actually done some reporting on. It's basically claims that Iran was actively pursuing a nuclear weapon, and this is something Steve Witkoff talked about in a Fox News interview a couple nights ago. And we contacted people with knowledge of the negotiations. Witkoff claimed that the Iranians bragged that they had enough enriched uranium for 11 nuclear bombs. It was a Sean Hannity interview. People who were present during the negotiations said that never happened, that the Iranians never made that statement. And in fact, they said we have enriched uranium because we started enriching uranium again after President Trump pulled out of the nuclear deal President Obama negotiated. So it's a continuation of the administration struggling to explain why they had to do this now. And in terms of the objectives, you know, I was struck like you. It's just very unusual. We talked about exquisite, you know, standoff munitions. At one point, he compared it to a football game. And at the end, he was sort of talking about, you know, pushing the throttle up. Waging war is one of the most serious things the American government can do. 6 Americans have lost their lives already. And so he seems enamored with the ability of air power alone and these bombs to break the will of Iranian forces. And maybe they will, and this is a terrible regime, and maybe they will be toppled. But I'm still concerned about the strategy the administration has here, and I still think that the objective is unclear.
All right, let's go live to Israel now. And MS Now international reporter Ines de la Cuetara. Ines, you heard the defense secretary say Iran's missile attacks have decreased since the start of the war. Is that the sense on the ground there?
Yeah, Mika, they said that Iran's ballistic missile capabilities are now down 86%, that they've established localized air superiority. But here in Israel, sirens have been continuing to go off throughout the day. Today, we had at least 3 sirens going off. At one point, there was incoming from both Iran and Hezbollah at the same time. No casualties reported there, but the Israelis also striking Iran today and saying that they're going to continue taking out any successor to Iran's supreme leader. This just after after they took out the council that was set to elect Iran's supreme leader just yesterday. The death toll continuing to go up across the region. In Iran, we know of over 1,000 people who have now been killed. That's according to Iranian state media. And like you guys mentioned, the U.S. military also identifying some of these service members, American service members who have been killed. They are Captain Cody A. Cork, Sergeant First Class Noah Tegens, Sergeant First Class Nicole Amor, Sergeant Declan Cody. U.S. military installations obviously have been targeted by Iran, but Iran also broadening its attacks and targeting across the region energy facilities, hotels, residential buildings, an airport, and of course U.S. embassies as well, targeted in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, in Beirut. We know a U.S. consulate in Dubai was struck by a drone as well. And so that is making it obviously much more complicated for Americans to leave the region. The State Department urging Americans to leave the region. But here in Israel, the embassy telling Americans that they are essentially on their own, that they cannot, that the embassy cannot assist them with evacuations. Americans are being told to contact the Israeli Ministry of Tourism to try to get onto shuttles that are going to be operated to, via land border crossings. Just anecdotally, that's how we got into Israel. We had to go via land border crossing. So Americans in Israel kind of, left to figure it out on their own. But I will say the State Department did say it will be chartering flights to evacuate Americans from Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and the UAE.
And the Trump administration getting some criticism for the slow effort to get those Americans out, not evacuate some of these places. We know the consulate in Dubai, the U.S. consulate in Dubai, was struck by an Iranian drone yesterday. David Rode, back to you. Secretary of Defense Hegseth did talk about how an American submarine sank an Iranian warship with a torpedo in international waters. We also had reports earlier this morning about an Israeli fighter jet shooting down a member of the Iranian opposition. And then this news here that Turkey is saying that NATO air defenses shot down a Iranian ballistic missile that was heading towards Turkey, a NATO country, a marked escalation. So there's certainly, this is, despite the confidence expressed there at the podium we just heard, this war seems to only be widening.
It does, and what's going on in the Gulf is the most critical thing, as we see with oil prices and the stock market. So President Trump has talked about having American warships, escort tankers. That'll help, but what we're seeing is the success of drones and sort of asymmetric warfare here. It was a drone that got through that killed those American service members. Drones could be, put on target to try to hit oil tankers, and they're hard to knock out all of them. They do get through. So I agree. I don't think this is over. I think they are depleting a lot of their weapons, but I think they're finding ways to get missiles through. That's the Turkey example that you mentioned is startling. It was shot down. It's in a way that Iran has now taken on NATO. They could as an alliance fight back. I don't think that'll happen at this point because the Europeans don't support this operation. But this is continuing apace. It's not slowing down.
All right, MS Now senior national security reporter David Rode, thank you so much. And MS Now international reporter Ines de la Cuetara, live from Israel, thank you as well. So a lot to get to as we cover the ongoing war with Iran. Also, Talerico wins the Democratic primary in Texas, runoff for the Republicans. We'll have the latest from that state. And DHS Secretary Kristi Noem goes back to Capitol Hill today after a grueling day of criticism on the Hill during her hearing yesterday. We'll have much more on all of that straight ahead on Morning Joe. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has agreed to appear before the House Oversight Committee to discuss his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Committee Chair, Republican Congressman James Comer of Kentucky, shared the news on social media yesterday, saying Lutnick proactively agreed to appear voluntarily. The billionaire businessman lived next door to Epstein in New York and, until recently, claimed to have cut ties with the financier in 2005. But the DOJ later released files showing Lutnick and Epstein kept communicating years after Epstein pleaded guilty to 2 charges of soliciting prostitution. Their last known exchange in the Justice Department documents came in 2018. The White House continues to support Lutnick and insists President Trump remains fully supportive. Lutnick has not been accused of any wrongdoing.
Meanwhile, more than 47,000 files relating to Jeffrey Epstein have been withheld by the Department of Justice. An analysis by the Wall Street Journal found that the withheld files include FBI notes documenting a series of interviews that a woman gave to agents in 2019. In those interviews, she alleged sexual misconduct by Donald Trump and Epstein when she was a minor in the 1980s. The DOJ had released a summary of her unverified claims and the first of 4 interview memos, but 3 additional documents, including those discussing Trump, were not released, despite the Epstein Files Transparency Act requiring disclosure of most witness statements. Trump has previously denied any wrongdoing. A DOJ spokeswoman told the paper that quote, the files were offline for further review and should be ready for reproduction by the end of the week. Democrats in Congress say they plan to investigate why the files were not released as required in the first place. The White House has defended the administration's handling of the matter, saying Trump has done more for Epstein victims than anyone before him. Mika, that's obviously not the case.
Yeah.
And every time that the DOJ releases Epstein files, it simply raises more and more questions about what they continue to withhold.
Yeah, we'll keep following this, of course. Coming up, the winning Democrat in North Carolina's primary race for U.S. Senate. Former Governor Roy Cooper joins us to preview his strategy for the general election straight ahead on Morning Joe.
America is winning decisively, devastatingly, and without mercy. Under the direct command of President Trump, the War Department unleashed this operation early Saturday morning, just 4 days ago, which means we need to remember 2 things. First, we are only 4 days into this. Metrics are shifting, dust is settling, and more forces are arriving. It's very early. And as President Trump has said, we will take all the time we need to make sure that we succeed. Second, we are only 4 days into this, and the results have been incredible. Historic, really. Only the United States of America could lead this, only us. But when you add the Israeli Defense Forces, a devastatingly capable force, the combination is sheer destruction for our radical Islamist Iranian adversaries.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth just moments ago discussing the latest on the war with Iran, saying America is winning thanks to the help of Israeli forces and calling the results so far historic. Secretary Hegseth was again joined by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, for their second briefing on the war with Iran. Hegseth said the U.S. and Israel have control of Iranian airspace in the next 2 days and that the assault on Iran was accelerating. The secretary also revealed that a U.S. submarine launched torpedoes sank an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean, the first time an American submarine has been used to fire a torpedo in anger against an enemy since World War II. The secretary also dismissed reports that stocks of munitions were running low. General Kane added that the Iranian military command and control structure is in a bad way and that the U.S. military campaign will now shift inland. The briefing comes as Defense Secretary of State Marco Rubio sought to walk back his comments yesterday that Israel had led the United States into the war with Iran. In a reversal from his statement 1 day earlier, the secretary said the administration's decision to attack Iran was unrelated to Israel's plans, as he attempted to zero in on yet another explanation for launching the strikes.
Yesterday, you told us that Israel was going to to strike Iran, and that's why we needed to get involved. Today, the president said that Iran was going to get.
Yeah, your statement is false. So that's not what I was asked very specifically. Were you there yesterday?
Yes, I asked.
Okay. No, were you the one that? Because somebody asked me a question yesterday. Did we go in because of Israel? And I said, you were asking me that. You that follow up, and I said no. I told you this had to happen anyway. The president made a decision, and the decision he made was that Iran was not going to be allowed to hide behind its ballistic missile program. That Iran was not going to be allowed to hide behind its ability to conduct these attacks. That decision had been made. The president systematically made a decision to systematically destroy this terroristic capability that they had, and we carried that out. I was very clear in that answer. This was a question of timing, of why this had to happen as a joint operation, not the question of the intent. Once the president made a decision that negotiations were not going to work, that they were playing us on the negotiations, and that this was a threat that was untenable, the decision was made to strike them. Listen, let me explain to you guys this in simple English, okay? Iran is run by lunatics, religious fanatic lunatics. They have an ambition to have nuclear weapons. They intend to develop those nuclear weapons behind a program of missiles and drones and terrorism that the world will not be able to touch them for fear of those things. And this is the weakest they've ever been. Now is the time to go after them. The president made the decision to go after them, take away their missiles, take away their navy, take away their drones, take away their ability to make those things so that they can never have a nuclear weapon. That's why the president made this decision. It was the right decision, and the world will be a safer place when these radical clerics no longer have access to these weapons. You see how they're using them now. Imagine how they would use them a year from now if they had more of these.
Well, Jonathan Lemire, that would have been clearer. Probably wishes he just said that, given the fact that none of it appears to show an imminent threat. At least he would have been sticking to some facts, as opposed to the ludicrous statements that the Secretary of State made, I don't know, a day before about how the U.S.'s hand was forced by Israel, and that Israel was going to attack, therefore we had to attack. That was painful, and it kind of leads one to feel there is no plan. Your thoughts?
Yeah, certainly the Secretary of State there tried to walk back what he clearly said the day before. His denials aside. In an amusing exchange with a reporter where he was like, were you here yesterday? And she was like, yes, I'm the one who asked the question. So, I mean, he has obviously gotten some blowback here and changed his tune on what happened. But we should also note that President Trump yesterday said, yes, that he said we believe an Iranian attack was imminent, yet for days now. Not only have administration officials told the press, but administration officials have told Congress that's simply not the case. There actually was no intelligence that Iran was about to launch an attack. So this remains deeply muddled. Let's now bring in managing editor at The Bulwark, Sam Stein, as well as former U.S. Senator and MS Now political analyst Claire McCaskill, and independent journalist Lindsay Keith. Our thanks to all of you for being here. Claire, we'll start with you. You sat on armed services. These are issues you've thought a lot about. Give us your take now about these mixed messages from the administration as to why this war even began. But more than that, it seems so very clear there's not a plan for the day after, including President Trump yesterday, in a moment perhaps of unexpected candor, said, sort of it dawned on him, like, oh, he was asked who could follow the Ayatollah as supreme leader, and he's like, oh, well, I guess the worst case would be someone who's just as bad. It's very clear there's no plan for the next day.
Yeah, I mean, we have a very muddled why and when. And I don't care what the administration does now. They have been incompetent in one of the most important things a government must do when going to war, and that is having clear rationale for an attack, clear rationale for lives lost, clear rationale for why it happened when it happened. And they can't fix this now. This is muddled beyond recognition. But more importantly, there's the what now question. And in the 12 years I sat on the Armed Services Committee, I spent a lot of time on contracting in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I can tell you that the what now is the biggest problem of all. We have no idea whether someone even more extreme is going to take over Iran. And if they do, what now? We have no idea whether the government will have any even wisp of democracy involved. And if it doesn't, then what now? We have no idea if the plans will be to immediately reconstitute whatever they need to do to get nuclear power. And then what now? So the lack of planning here in terms of the day after is stunning. And I must tell you, I never thought I would hear the Secretary of Defense talk like my 12-year-old grandson saying that our enemy is quote unquote toast. The way he discussed this was not serious. It was not somber. It was almost gleeful. And frankly, I think that is startling to most Americans. I found it startling, the tone that he took in this press conference. I get it that he thinks this is all about killing people and showing lethality and supporting the warriors. And certainly we must support our warriors. But the tone of it was, in my mind, inappropriate for this moment in history.
Yeah, and such a contrast, Hegseth's tone versus that from General Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff,
Correct.
who stuck to the operation, who was mournful, who paid tribute to the American lives lost, and who acknowledged that this war is taking a toll on all involved. Sam Stein, despite what Defense Secretary Hegseth said, there's not an indication that Iran is toast, or at least that they're aware that they're, quote, toast, because the conflict only seems to be expanding. As we just talked about a few minutes ago with David Rode, Israel shot down an Iranian fighter jet, it appears, over their airspace. A U.S. submarine used a torpedo to blow up an Iranian warship, and now reports of a missile fired towards Turkey, intercepted by NATO defenses. This is a regime in Iran that may not officially have a leader right now, but is not showing any sign of laying down their arms.
Yeah, well, a couple things can be true at the same time, right? One could be that Iran is badly outmatched, that they are depleting their weapons, that their air defenses, that their ships are sunk. All the things that Pete Hegseth was bragging about can very well be true. Does that mean that the situation is under control? Not necessarily. I mean, Claire was absolutely right. One of the enduring lessons, I should say, of the Iraq War was that once you break it, you got to figure out how to fix it. And chaos can consume this country very quickly. It could lead to acts of terrorism. It could lead to acts of belligerence. It's disheartening to see or to listen to Hegseth say this stuff, because what comes through is that they don't have a day after plan. It's very obvious that they can overwhelm the Iranians with bombs and missiles. But again, who's going to lead Iran? Donald Trump himself said that the 2 or 3 people that he had thought of as potential replacements were killed in this attack. That's not an insignificant development, right? And even down to the logistical matters. I talked to people in the State Department. They're shocked at how the administration did not anticipate the need to evacuate people from embassies around the region. And when they did, to have the inability to actually get them out safely. They're literally telling them, we cannot guarantee your safety. I mean, this is just, I don't know, it's shocking stuff. So it also is creating, clear political problems for the administration at home. I mean, Rubio usually is a clean operator. I was a bit surprised to see him have to walk back like that, his statement, but this is creating a real anxiety on the Hill. And Lindsay, I mean, you talk to these people all the time. There's going to be a war powers vote today. It's going to get shot down, obviously. But I don't know, I've talked to a bunch of Republicans who maybe publicly will support the president here, but they're discomforted by what's happening here. Maybe they want to see a quick resolution, but I don't know what you're hearing. Is it something similar to that?
It's interesting to kind of see the shift with Republicans and how they talk about it publicly and how they talk about it behind closed doors. But I think many Republicans really are giving President Trump the benefit of the doubt right now. I think privately they're a little bit nervous because no one was expecting Iran to respond this way. Even some of the Arab nations that I'm talking to, they weren't expecting this. And we've heard that from them publicly as well, that they feel how Iran is responding is very cowardly. But when it pertains to Republicans, they really trust President Trump, and that when he says that he can execute this war without putting boots on the ground, that he could. I think what really shook them is when he said on Monday that he would be willing to put boots on the ground. He didn't want to put himself in a corner, and that's what has made them uncomfortable. But you heard the secretary there saying that, look, what we have done from airstrikes and not putting boots on the ground. And I know from talking to people privately, President Trump really is cautioning not to put boots on the ground if possible, but didn't, again, want to paint himself into a corner.
And repeatedly, the administration and members of Congress who have been briefed by administration make clear, though that's not the desired outcome, boots on the ground, they have not ruled it out. Much more on this ahead. And coming up here on Morning Joe, we'll speak with a member of the House Intelligence Committee about more of what Congress has been told by the Trump administration about the war in Iran. Plus, we'll dig into the results out of Texas last night, which now have many Democrats dreaming of a big upset this November. We're going to get a live report from the Lone Star State. That's straight ahead. Plus, our next guest secured the Democratic nomination in the closely watched race for the U.S. Senate out of North Carolina. That state's former governor, Roy Cooper, will join us. Welcome back. Live shot of the Capitol there as Congress appears deeply split over the administration's actions in Iran. After classified briefings yesterday, House and Senate lawmakers were divided largely along party lines. Democrats argued that President Trump and his team failed to articulate whether there was imminent threat, while Republicans largely rallied behind the White House's actions. House Speaker Mike Johnson would not refer to the military campaign as a war, only as an operation, and he told reporters we had to act because there was an imminent threat. However, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said after the briefing that there was no explanation as to what actually prompted the decision to, quote, pursue this war of choice. Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy of Illinois. He is a member of both the House Oversight and Intelligence Committees. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. I know you can't get into all the details from these briefings, of course, but give us your overview here. Did the administration effectively make the case for war?
No, they did not. It was a deeply unsatisfactory hearing, and they did not answer basic questions that I believe the American people and Congress has with regard to why we're there, what's the duration of these operations, what's the end game. And as a consequence, we're left with the impression, at least I am, that we're entering yet another endless war, which my constituents and I believe the American people desperately want to avoid.
So, Congressman, on that very point, did the administration lay out any vision at all as to what they hope Iran will look like when the fighting stops, whenever that might be?
No, they did not. And I think that not only did they not do that, but for instance, they said they wanted regime change, but now we're not seeing the regime change. Instead, we're seeing a more thuggish cast of characters potentially take over for Khamenei, whom nobody's mourning in his death. But at the same time, we're worried that a worse leadership is going to take over. And the other thing is, they talked about erasing or getting rid of the nuclear program, but even after they pronounced it dead last summer, after they claimed that they obliterated it, now we know that it's underway again, and they've suggested that bombing alone cannot get rid of it.
Congressman Sam Stein here. This morning, during his briefing, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth mentioned that we have taken out the people who have tried or who did try to assassinate President Donald Trump, the Iranians. That's now the second time that the attempted assassination of Donald Trump has been mentioned by this administration, perhaps as a motivating factor for these strikes, but I don't know. Did that issue come up in these hearings at all? And do you think that this is part of the motivation for why the president chose to authorize this campaign?
I'm not sure. I didn't hear about that at the briefings. I didn't hear it. But in any case, right now, I think what needs to motivate us are objectives beyond that. And we're not hearing about those either. In the meantime, the costs of this potential operation or this current operation are escalating. We've already lost 6 servicemen and women. On top of that, We have thousands of Americans stranded at airports throughout the Middle East who are also potentially targets themselves. So this is a very dangerous situation, not to mention the cost to our economy, too.
Congressman, this is an important question, I think. Did you hear anything about what now? Was there any discussion of the steps to stabilize Iran in a way that it is no longer a threat to Americans across the globe? They have the ability through very sophisticated terrorist networks to do one-off strikes against Americans, no matter where they are on the globe. Was there any discussion about that? Who is going to take over the leadership of Iran, and what impact America's presence will have in that regard?
The answer is no, no, and no. There's no discussion of those particular topics, and I think that the administration doesn't have answers. And I think one of the reasons why they don't want to come to Congress, or they didn't come to Congress as they should have under the War Powers Act, is because they didn't have answers to these questions. They knew that the American people would oppose what they have done so far. And I think that that's in part why I believe the War Powers resolution that's going forward this week may be successful in drawing some Republicans, along with most Democrats, against these hostilities.
Democratic member of the House Intel Committee, Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy. Thank you, Congressman. We should note he's also a candidate for senator in the state of Illinois. Thank you again. We turn now to yesterday's primaries in a number of states, and we're going to get a live report out of Texas in just a moment. There are some new developments there. But first, let's bring in the winning Democrat in the North Carolina primary for that state's Senate seat, former Governor Roy Cooper. Governor, thank you for joining us. Congratulations on your win yesterday. North Carolina, of course, identified by many in the party as a real pickup opportunity to this point in the campaign, and we're a long way between now and November. What are the issues that are resonating with those in your state?
It's family economics right now, Jonathan. I'm running because of that parent who is struggling to afford groceries for her children. I'm running for that patient who is struggling with health care costs because of the One Big Beautiful Bill. I'm running for farmers who are having to deal with these oppressive tariffs, paying more for equipment and seeing their bottom line evaporate. I think it's critical that we pay attention to what's happening right here at home and focus on working families. And I'm hearing that all over North Carolina. I want to warn people, though, that in this race, I've gotten the nomination and people are feeling pretty good right now, but I want to let people know that a Democrat has not been elected to the U.S. Senate from North Carolina since 2008. And we've only elected 2 Democrats in our state in almost 40 years to the U.S. Senate. So this will be a tough battle. It is likely to be the most expensive campaign in U.S. Senate history. It's a seat that we need to win for those very working people. It's time for us to elect a senator who's for everyday people and not the big corporations and the billionaires that we're seeing from my opponent, Michael Whatley, and his other D.C. insider friends who are constantly looking out for themselves and those who already have a lot.
So, Governor, North Carolina, of course, a significant military state, a number of bases there in your state. I've had the pleasure of being on a few of them. Now that war has erupted in the Middle East, this attack on Iran, what is the sense there from North Carolinian families who now may be sending sons and daughters into harm's way? Do they feel like this is a justified conflict?
Well, first, they deserve to know why. I'm deeply grateful for their service and mourn the losses that we have already experienced. And I'm grateful that they have been successful in eliminating leaders and damaging weapons of an evil and oppressive regime. But this administration owes them and the people of North Carolina and our country on why we're doing this and what comes next. There must be an exit strategy here. We cannot afford another forever war, particularly when we do not know what the consequences are. We've heard 4 or 5 reasons why this is done. Many of them are conflicting. So it's important, I think, that this administration explain what is happening and how we're going to get out of this, because we need to focus on here at home. This is what this administration promised. This is what my opponent, Michael Whatley, has promised. We're going to focus here at home, yet that focus has disappeared. This president promised he was going to fix everything for consumers with their rising cost on day one. They haven't done it. In fact, they've made it worse. I hope people can join our campaign. Go to roycooper.com, sign up, find out what we're doing here, because we've got to take this U.S. Senate seat for the people of North Carolina and our country.
So, Governor, Senator Tom Tillis, leaving the Senate, Republican from your state, certainly tore into Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Gnome yesterday. Talk to us, if you will, about your views on Secretary Gnome's job performance, but also the ICE operations we've seen across the country. North Carolina has been bandied about as a potential place where agents may go in the future. What sort of check would you want to provide on the administration's efforts?
Well, first, we have to have a secure border. Second, we need to make sure we focus federal resources on deporting violent criminals. But we need ICE agents to abide by the same rules and constitutional requirements that state and local law enforcement have to follow. And when you're going in and disrupting schools and businesses and separating families and sweeping up people just because of what they look like, often including American citizens and people who are here otherwise legally, that's not the way to do things. It's wrong in and of itself, but also then you're losing focus on what the people really want you to do, which is to find the violent criminals who are here illegally and make sure that they are deported. And I think they are failing in that job, and they need to step up, do it the right way, and concentrate their efforts in making sure we deport these violent criminals.
All right, the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate in the great state of North Carolina, former Governor Roy Cooper. Governor, thank you for joining us this morning. Congrats again.
Thanks.
We will, of course, be following that race between now and November. Next, we're going to get a live report out of Texas, where we have a big development in that state's race for the U.S. Senate. That's right after this quick break. Pretty shot there. Dallas, Texas, 8:33 in the morning in the Central Time Zone. And we're going to turn now to the results of the closely watched Senate primary races right there in the Lone Star State. Republicans are headed for a runoff, while State Representative James Talerico secured the Democratic nomination. Just moments ago, his opponent, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, conceded, bowed out of the race, and called for Democrats to rally around all their nominees in order to win this November. MS Now's Britt Miller has more.
From close contests to court challenges, primary election night in Texas was anything but conventional. In the high-stakes U.S. Senate race, top GOP candidates incumbent John Cornyn and State Attorney General Ken Paxton are now headed for a runoff in May. Neither was able to secure the 50% needed to win, both speaking at campaign events last night.
Just like the primary, we have a plan to win the runoff, and we are in the process of executing it. Judgment Day is coming for Ken Paxton.
Tonight, change was on the ballot, and change won. And now, as we head into this runoff, we're going to make the choice even clearer.
Attorney General Paxton is a Trump ally with a controversial history, including an impeachment trial due to corruption allegations. Cornyn is hoping to serve a 5th term. On the Democratic side, the race was called close to 3 a.m. for State Representative James Talerico. He spoke to voters shortly before the win.
Tonight, our campaign is shocking the nation.
The race was too close to call for most of last night, with U.S. Representative Jasmine Crockett raising concerns about voter confusion in 2 counties, including her own congressional base.
But I can tell you now that people have been disenfranchised. The reason that we knew that there were problems is because we were receiving the phone calls and the emails.
Voters reported being turned away from polling sites because of a rule change. They were only allowed to vote at specific precincts instead of anywhere in the county. And then a late-night judicial whiplash. A district judge ordered polls in 1 county to stay open to Democrats for 2 more hours, giving them more time to vote. But after a challenge from Attorney General Paxton, a Texas Supreme Court judge paused that ruling, saying votes cast by voters who weren't in line by 7 p.m. should be separated out and considered provisional.
Unfortunately, this is what Republicans like to do. And so they specifically targeted Dallas County, and I think we all know why.
Political strategist Mark McKinnon says a Democratic win in Texas in November could mean a blue wave in Washington.
I guarantee you that the United States Senate will be held by Democrats, because if Texas goes, there's going to be others that go that hadn't been anticipated before.
Why do you feel like this is the time where it could actually happen in November?
Well, I think the pendulum has swung on MAGA and Trump, and I think that fever has broken. The president's unpopular. The economy's in bad shape. We may be in a very unpopular war. And Talerico is an unusual talent. Crockett's a great candidate, too.
And he says the possibility of Democratic control in Congress is causing alarm among Republicans.
There's panic in the air in Texas, and believe me, that fever's going to spread to Washington very quickly after today.
And a Democrat hasn't won a Senate election in Texas since 1988, but state data shows early voting in the Democratic primary is already more than double the totals for the 2024 and 2022 primaries. Back to you.
MS Now's Britt Miller with that report. Joining us live now from Dallas, MS Now White House reporter Jake Traylor. Jake, good morning. Thanks for joining us. Let's start with the Republican side. We're going to a runoff, neck and neck. President Trump has yet to weigh in, did not endorse in the primary. There's going to be a lot of pressure and interest on him doing so soon. I think Ken Paxton, many would argue, is closer to Trump's view of the world. Cornyn, though, at least the Republican establishment, thinks has a better chance to win. Remains to be seen when or if Trump will weigh in.
Yeah, Jonathan, that's right. Good morning. Look, there is this palpable energy in Texas right now. I was born and raised in this state, and for decades, Democrats have desired to see a Democrat elected to the United States Senate. And I think for many individuals this morning, Democrats in the state, that this feels like this precipice moment of sorts. When we're talking about Talerico clinching this nomination, his kind of whole strategy has essentially been to broaden the tent of Democrats, to welcome in moderates, Republicans. I'm from a small conservative town, and I have friends who voted for Donald Trump in the 2024 election that switched their ticket to Democrat and casted a ballot for Talerico last night and plan to support him in the general election because they say he represents their Texas faith-based values. On the other side of that coin, it looks quite different because we've got Cornyn and Paxton really heating up in this continued contentious, bloody battle between the two individuals. There has been tens of millions of dollars raised in this intra-GOP party fighting going on. And we've spoken with senior officials for the Paxton and the Cornyn campaign. They've both told us their strategy here going forward is what you mentioned. To clinch the nomination, they believe they need to most align with the MAGA agenda with Donald Trump, which may fare well in a primary election, but might look quite different in a general election where this MAGA agenda of the president's isn't incredibly popular, even in the state of Texas, even amongst Republicans right now. But as you said, the president has not weighed in and endorsed specifically one of these candidates. I was talking to a White House official last night who said he believes eventually it is coming for Paxton, but that the president has removed himself from it at the moment. As we know, he loves to say he endorses winners only and might be fearful that he would endorse the wrong candidate in this case. Both of these candidates, though, will be deeply vying for the president's endorsement as we head into this contentious, bloody, continued, now one-on-one battle between the two individuals. Jonathan?
Many in the White House political shop want the Cornyn endorsement, but of course, the decision will be Trump's and Trump's alone. Jake, real quick, one more beat on the Democratic side. We know Texas has been this elusive prize for a decade or more for Democrats. They've come close-ish a couple of times, 2024 felt like a setback, but there does seem to be renewed optimism this time around.
Yeah, that's right, Willie, Jonathan. And I really do believe that kind of comes from what is Talerico's attempt, which is to broaden the tent for Democrats. The individuals that we spoke with yesterday and last night, too, even at the Paxton watch party, was that there is this idea that there is a desire for fresh blood in the state of Texas. Cornyn has served for 2 decades. And sometimes when we talk to Paxton voters and when we talk to Talerico voters, we kind of got the same energy of people want something fresh, something new. And Talerico really from the jump has said he is open to welcoming moderates, Republicans. He is a faith-based individual. And so what we're seeing, it feels like, is something different in the state of Texas. We know that for a long time, Democrats have hoped to have this Democrat U.S. Senator come out of the state. And in this moment, it feels like that's more reachable than it's been before.
MS Now's Jake Traylor live for us this morning from Dallas. Thank you so much. Our panel will weigh in on these races in just a moment. Plus, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Gnome will be back on Capitol Hill in just a few moments, this time before the House Judiciary Committee, after she faced bipartisan scrutiny before the Senate panel yesterday. We're going to play for you some of those sharp exchanges straight ahead.
There are many files where Jeffrey Epstein seems to speak as though he does know you personally. He quotes, "Hey, Hillary Clinton is much prettier in person." This was Tuesday, September 20th, 2011. And then another...
I'm not going to object to that.
Guess Epstein didn't have a type. Where was that Hillary in 2016?
Claire McCaskill, once again, Secretary Clinton getting the best of Republicans in a deposition setting. Feel free to weigh in on that, but also we're really interested to get your thoughts on Texas. We just had those reports, including one live from Dallas. Republicans in a runoff, Talerico, the clear winner on the Democratic side. Do you think this could finally be the year that Texas, at least sort of, goes blue?
Well, let me say 3 things. First, it is a very bad time in American politics to be an old incumbent. Secondly, I think when the dust settles, we will trace the margin of Talerico's victory in this primary to an overperformance. Americans are not comfortable living freely in America right now. They are frightened at what is going on, and I think they will overperform in the general. And finally, the headache they have in Washington right now. Keep in mind, $100 million was spent in the Republican primary. Now we have another $100 million that will be spent on the runoff. That's $200 million that could be spent in other races around the country, and they're having to shovel this money into Texas. So it is really good for the Democrats in terms of the map, in terms of spreading of resources. There is no way that the Republicans can hold the Senate if they have to invest in Texas to the extent they're going to have to drag either Cornyn or Paxton across the finish line.
I don't disagree with that, actually, but there is one element I would add, and I'd love Lindsay's take on this too, which is Texas can be and has been fool's gold for Democrats many, many times. And there are a number of perhaps more winnable races for Democrats in the Senate. I'm looking at Alaska, looking at Iowa, looking at Ohio. Democrats hold their own. They still need to flip 4 seats. And those races probably are a bit more winnable than Texas. And yet Democrats get sucked into going into Texas all the time, and Talerico gives them this kind of opportunity here. And Lindsay, I don't know if you feel the same way, but there is some agitation, or I should say anxiety, I would say, among Senate Democratic operatives who worry that the party will get, lured in by this incredible opportunity and forget that there are other opportunities that may be more fruitful out there.
Yeah, Sam, it's a unique situation in Texas, specifically because it's such a Republican stronghold. And you have to remember that President Trump hasn't endorsed. And you look what happened to Dan Crenshaw, the only incumbent in Texas not to win his race. Trump didn't endorse him. Trump's endorsement actually carries a lot of weight in Texas. Right. And I think that's why you have a runoff with Cornyn and Paxton, because Trump has decided to hold back his endorsement. I think once he does endorse, many people think likely Cornyn, that Republicans will throw a lot of money, as the Congresswoman was saying, into this, and that could harm them. I think the biggest concern for Republicans in this is you have two people who, you heard some of their language to each other, they're fighting each other instead of fighting one cause, and that could be a detriment to them. And then Talerico, again, a very unique candidate in a state that is the underpinnings, I lived in Texas for a long time, is very religious people. And so I think part of his rhetoric really has resonated with the young voter there. And so I think it will be close, but I still think that, to your point, Democrats should have some concern. But I also think they should take the bigger picture of, look at what Talerico was able to do over Crockett. And he ultimately was able to pick off those Republicans or independents who haven't been happy with what Trump has been doing and win them over. It wasn't the more progressive candidate. It was the more moderate candidate who won in the end. And I think that will remain to be true in 2026.
Another winner last night in Texas for a House seat, Mark Teixeira, the former Texas Ranger and New York Yankee first baseman. Sam Stein, you reacted just as I hoped you would. Sam Stein, Claire McCaskill, Lindsay Keith, our thanks to you all. Teixeira, Yankee, no thanks. All right, we'll be right back in 2 minutes with more Morning Joe. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Gnome returns to Capitol Hill at the top of the hour, this time to appear before the House Judiciary Committee. This comes one day after she faced a bipartisan grilling from senators, and none more heated than from retiring Republican Senator Thom Tillis.
There's very few people in Capitol Hill that support law enforcement more than me, including the sworn ICE officers. In fact, I've just been told, fortunately, in about a week and a half, we're going to get a plaque on the wall over the Capitol thanking the Capitol police officers and all the agencies that responded on January 6th. All those thugs have actually been pardoned, and yet we haven't thanked the Capitol police officers for their work here. So when I say I'm unapologetically pro-law enforcement, you can count in every single sworn officer in Homeland Security. So why am I disappointed with Secretary Gnome? Because we're not going after enough people who did this damage at the expense of running numbers that Stephen Miller wants out of the White House. We just want numbers. We want 1,000 a day, 6,000 a day, 9,000 a day, because numbers matter, right? No, they don't matter. Quality matters, not quantity, quality. And what we've seen is a disaster. Under your leadership, Ms. Gnome, a disaster.
Senator Tillis unleashed now that he is retiring. Finally, a short time ago, just a few minutes ago, the Department of Defense released this video of a U.S. submarine torpedo strike that sank an Iranian warship off the coast of Sri Lanka. Look at that. The frigate was in the Indian Ocean and is the first such sinking by a U.S. sub since World War II, according to the Pentagon. That does it for us this morning. We will, of course, see you tomorrow at 6 a.m. Eastern. Ana Cabrera will pick up MS Now's live coverage after a short final break.